So, what do you think Sophie's bat signal would be? I mean, like, how do we feel about the jeans with the handkerchief sticking out of the pockets? How do we feel about that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obvious. The real question would be which pocket and which handkerchief.
It's already very intricate.
But then
signal.
also, like, when it's like, you know how it's like a yellowy spotlight projected at the sky? I guess that means that it's always going to be a yellow handkerchief. So
True.
it's like,
Oh.
yeah. So then the real question is like left pocket, right pocket, you know?
I still haven't
which
figured
is-
out the
is a
code, by
fan.
the way. I'm too
Yeah.
afraid to Google it to
This is
figure
Or
out
it could
the
be both,
code.
both pockets, you know? Like,
Yeah. Why not? This is why we need to. We need her here. This is what we need. This is the
these are the big
paradox.
questions. Yeah.
The
I don't
paradox
know.
is we need the bat signal to call her, but she's not here, so we don't know which bat
So we don't know
signal
which bat signal to
works.
use.
I was
'Cause
thinking
I've
that
got
maybe the
this,
bat
like,
signal
garage
was.
full of bat
I was thinking that
signals.
maybe Sophie's back signal was signaled, and that's why she's unable to make it because she's out.
Is that how a bat signal works? I don't know.
Yeah, you shine the bat. Actually, I don't even know. Oh my god!
Didn't Batman also have,
none of
like-
us are nerds in this way.
It was like
not
the
a
red
single one of
phone.
us.
That's right.
Didn't like Batman also had that red phone that was like, this is like, you know, like calling people, whatever, like that. Like, why did he like? I mean, I guess like sometimes you want to call Batman, but you don't want the whole city to know you're calling Batman. I guess that's probably it.
That's
That's
right.
like the late night
upsetting
light.
some Batman fan out there that's like
Yeah,
furious
was
that
like,
we're just
no!
completely
Yeah.
misremembering Batman completely.
Sorry, Mildred. I'm sure that's Mildred.
Yeah, sorry,
actually.
Mildred.
She's gonna hate us. Hey, it's Red Planet. Oh my god! Look at
Wow.
the start of
Oh
the
my
show.
god.
That
We
was
did
an
it.
extremely
Hanky.
cold open. Just want to
Yeah.
make everyone very aware. This is called the cold open. This is
Yeah.
a frigid open.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. It is that time of the week, and let's open things up to the first part of the podcast of the show. It's
Yeah.
What is
Yes.
the most base thing you did this week?
Well, so we'll get back into this in the news in a minute, but most people are probably aware, if you're on Twitter or anything like that, you saw old mate, I can't even remember her full name, but Posey Parker, the British turf, the you know, she's kind of like, I would say, like one of the figureheads of that movement, one of the biggest public
Kelly J. Keane
faces.
Minshall is her name. Yeah.
Kelly J. Keane Minshall.
Yeah.
She's one of the biggest probably like personalities of turfdom that isn't just like an anonymous internet face. She started a down under tour. She started with Australia, and each event kind of progressively got more, I would say, more opposed to her presence. Yeah, I mean, it was like, I think it was the Melbourne one that kicked it off first, where a bunch of like open Nazis just showed up to support her and were kind of like standing with her behind the barriers, everything like that. And
Why were
then,
Nazis there?
Yeah,
Oh, weird.
whoa,
Oh
dude.
god. Who knows?
That must
Yeah.
have been a fluke.
And they were like very obvious, like they were with them behind the barriers. The members were like hanging out with each other. They were giving each other high fives and hugs and shaking hands and all this kind of stuff. And then afterwards, they were kind of like, "Oh no!" They showed up with the trans rights activists and all this, just kind of just dumb shit. But at the time, they were very glad to have a bunch of like young dudes there to kind of like leverage their physicality, right? Regardless of like anything else, like it's like, yeah, of course they have views in common, they they have common tactics, everything like that, but they also, I think it's like a lot of this group kind of, for all their talk about like male violence or whatever like that, they absolutely like fucking loved to have some violent males with them, and so they left. They got chased out of Melbourne. They went down to Hobart and had like Hobart's in Tasmania. It's a small island, but it seems like literally everyone on the island showed up to chase them out of there too. And it was talk went on for like a couple minutes, and she got chased out. And she was saying that Hobart was the worst place that she had ever been. And true kind of like trans-Tasman rivalry way. New Zealand said, the worst place you have been so far. And yeah, stepped it up a
Nice.
little bit. So I missed the actual like because she got chased out so quick that I actually missed her being speaking and everything like that. It was like everything was all like over in like 20 minutes or so. So I actually missed that, but then there was a bunch of stuff that kind of came afterwards, which I'll get into when we kind of cover the thing in the news or whatever. But yeah, what about Mule? You've been up to some hijinks as well.
Oh
What
man.
do you tell us about that?
Yeah, so many hijinks. So yeah, fucking hell. I mean, pick your choice. I feel like I've done the Red Planet Gauntlet this week in activism, which is a little wild. So Tuesday, I went down with the union to Westminster to support a non-reformist reform. So GMTU are part of a coalition of organizations that stand for housing rights in the UK, and we've been lobbying the government along with this cohort of organizations to abolish Section 21. And if you don't know what a Section 21 eviction is, it's a no-fault eviction. So basically, the landlord turns around, serves you an order approved by the council, the county court, and they say, right, you're out in about a month for no reason. I'm just doing it for whatever. And this sort of results in landlords just doing this to put up their rent because they know that their current tenant is not going to stand for it or whatever. So they're just going to evict them, make them homeless. It's really, really fucked up shit. It's surprising that the Tories are actually talking about abolishing Section 21. They're more progressive than Labour in their housing policy at the minute.
Why?
Well,
Why
yeah,
would
well,
there has to be some horrible reason for it, right?
Well,
they accidentally.
Here's the thing. They stood on it in their election manifesto. They said we will abolish Section 21. That's why they're sort of still entertaining it. I am not particularly convinced that they're going to do the things that we want them to do. They may abolish Section 21, but they may dress it up in a different way. We actually spoke to the actual housing minister in Westminster on Tuesday, and she was just doing a bunch of Tory politics talk. So anyway, whether anything comes of that, we'll see. She did say on record that Section 21 was going to be abolished before autumn. So I don't know. We'll see.
Is it something that like, do you think Section 1 is like disproportionately used against like elderly people or something, and they're trying to use it to like court the kind of vote of?
You know what? I think that's a pretty good observation, Tim, because it's a non-discriminatory Section 21 piece of legislation that does discriminate. Don't get me wrong, but it can affect everybody. And I think that they are terrified actually of stories coming out. Like, for example, with the renters union, we tried to do an eviction resistance for an old white guy once, and it's like, oh, of course, well, they're not going to want to hear like military veterans getting put on the street
exactly. And also if it's like their voter base or whatever like that, if they're relying on like like a whole bunch of votes from like older people, and these older people like, oh, they know their mate down the street got Section 21 or whatever like that, right. It's like,
yeah, it's definitely going to be a electorate decision. This is how these guys operate. And in fact, this kind of leads into the next bit of activism that I did this week, which is basically legitimate from the ground up community organizing. So some of the staff organizers at GMTU were able to basically start a new branch in a place in Manchester called Harper Hay. Harper Hay, most of the residents there call it a dumping ground, quote unquote, because it's where a lot of people get housed who, other communities do not want them. So we're talking, other communities do not want them in quotes. This is what the housing services say. This is what the people who, rehouse people say. But it's just because they're people who've been in prison. They're migrants. They are, potentially GRT people. You know what I mean? Like it isn't that like other communities don't want them. It's just that they have then an excuse to put marginalized people all in the same area. We have set up a cafe there, which is really cool. And Dan, who we had on Red Planet, who does a lot of food empowerment stuff, he actually managed to get hold of some veg that Marks and Spencer's were throwing out. So he didn't even have to break BDS, for those of you who know about Marks and Spencer's and their relation to Israel, in order to get this food from Marks and Spencer. So we had this really posh veg like leeks and sweet potatoes and all that, and we made like a nice dinner for these people in Harper Hay. And then we spoke with them about power mapping, and power mapping is basically where you say to people like, okay, where do you think the power is in your community, and do you think these people are on your side? Sort of telling them what they need to do, but letting them come to their own conclusions. So, you know, they were saying like, oh, well, you know, the people in power around here are the Labour MP and the Labour councillors, but they don't do anything for people here. And one thing that I do just want to point out, because as you said, Tim, the reason that the Tories might want to abolish Section 21 is because it's an electorate analysis. So like politicians in Westminster, they look at things in terms of election results, right? So when everybody voted against Corbyn, well, they didn't vote against Corbyn, but like, you know, a lot of people did vote against Labour in the 2019 election, but they voted because of his Brexit deal. That's widely what's accepted. His Brexit stance was actually pro-Brexit, which is interesting. But anyway, that's by the by. I'm sure people know about this. But Keir Starmer seems to think that they voted against Labour because they're all bigots and they hate migrants and they hate protesters and they hate all, you know, all this base stuff. But when I spoke to some of the people in this Labour stronghold, this Labour council ward, they said, well, we actually voted for UKIP, but it wasn't because we're racist. It's because we wanted to give Labour a kick up the arse to actually do something in our town. They're not addressing the material conditions of the people on the fucking ground. They live in shit. They have nothing. Do you know what I mean? Nobody listens to them, not even the Labour councillors. So that was a very interesting analysis point, which was like, yeah, it's quite obvious that these people aren't bigots. They're just, you know, they're not having their needs met, basically. And the people who are in power are Labour.
Is there similar to Trump's coming to power? Like, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not about to say that there wasn't bigotry going on there. Many people voted for Trump because of bigotry, but he really capitalized on how the Democrats completely let down the working class, and was just like, we need to drain the swamp. Like a lot of what he said had like kernels of truth to it, and also exploited people's fucking very, very understandable, reasonable frustrations with the Democratic Party.
That's literally it. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
It's like the same everywhere. We see it with like a lot of like right-wing populists or whatever, where it's like they scratching at people's legitimate anxieties, encouraging their worst bigotries, but just because, you know, it's like in their absence of class analysis, they're kind of like encouraging the bad shit, you know?
Right.
So instead of being like, oh, you know, it's like, it's, you know, like it's the greater economic system and, you know, the capitalists are the people at the top or whatever like that. It's like they reduce it to like, oh yeah, it's the deep state or it's the, you know, fucking, you know, like the international Jewry or whatever they want to say, you know, like, and it's like, and it's, it's the same story all over the world.
Yeah.
It's like fucking wild, right? Like,
yeah.
And and then the final thing that I did this week was I went to bully some fascists yesterday who turned up to be transphobic and shit. So yeah, Manchester's anti-fascist anti-fascists basically bullied them into a corner, made a bunch of noise all day, and that was really, really based. So yeah, that's the final thing.
That is very base, very cool.
That I did this week.
Very, very
sorry for my tone. I would like to tell everyone, after those two displays from Tim and Mule, let me tell you what I did this week. Everyone, I have been doing yoga every morning and trying to set an intention for my day. And my intention that I've been trying to set is that I intend to be happy. And it doesn't mean that if I'm unhappy, it's a failure, but I'm trying to actually go pursue things that will bring me joy and avoid things that I know will not bring me joy. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to actually like have this intention. Also, you know what? Thanks to my community, I have been hydrating more. So that's based to drink water.
Extremely based. Especially if you're a little bit acidic, Antifa, and then you bring down the, you know, the pH.
It's not bullying fascists, but it's not bullying fascists, but yeah, I've been kind of like in this like I've been kind of in this place where I've been doing a lot of self-care, but like trying to rescue myself in a way. And I don't want to go too far though, because sometimes you can just end up cutting yourself off from the world, because it does feel good to like not engage with a lot of the world, you know? But I think that a healthy reestablishment of your own personal like health and happiness, or not even establishing any of that. You know, some of us feel like, I don't know if I've ever truly been quote unquote happy. That's a whole conversation we can have someday, but I'm trying to at least have the intention to try to pursue that. So that is what I've been doing.
I think that is extremely based.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think that counts for a lot, because you got to be a happy and healthy comrade, right?
Just drink some
what I
water.
mean? Whatever that means for you, like, yeah, I think
Thank
that's
you.
extremely important, and it means the world.
There's no bullying transphobes.
Yeah, but you bully them in your Twitch chat every day, so
I do. I do.
That's still very
Thank
based.
you.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we've got a fair bit of news to go through, as per usual.
Yeah, let's carry on with the news. I'll just pick up where I left off earlier for the based thing I did this week with the Posey Parker thing. So I'll start with this, and then we'll get into the other, you know, international news and stuff. But no, yeah, it was great. So I got there after the main thing had happened. But basically what happened was even the night before, a bunch of people had gone to the park and just covered it in chalk messages and drawings and stuff, like all kinds of like trans rights messages, all kinds of, like the flag, everything was like everywhere and stuff. And then people just started getting there really early. Like she wasn't supposed to get there till like 11 o'clock, but there was like, yeah, hundreds and hundreds of people there even before like 10 o'clock. They reckon that like it is kind of annoying, because the news papers and everything like that, they reported as like a couple hundred protesters or whatever. But there was like, since then, from all the photos and videos and stuff, they actually reckon that there was like somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 people showed up, which is like huge, you know?
Yeah, holy.
And so, yeah, people got there. The security company had set up barriers, but the security company that she hired was really, really bad and really unprofessional. A friend of mine is a security. He runs a security business. He has for years, and he's really good, super professional. He kind of like hires a lot of people that are like they're all people from like a similar background in like fighting sports and all this kind of stuff like that. So they're very like, like they know what's up. And he actually emailed her ahead of the event and asked if she wanted free security, because he's got a bunch of trans security guards, and he was like, let's just show up and it's just like,
that's
like
funny.
Oh my god. But she said that it was already sorted. And so then we got there, and I think it probably was just like whoever was cheapest or whoever else would like accept the contract, because beforehand the group that had her contract for the Wellington event dropped out when they found out who she was, and she was trying to raise money to hire a new one. So yeah, so whoever they were just really, really bad, super kind of like they just didn't know anything about like managing a crowd or anything like that. And I think it was just way beyond their expectations, probably way beyond Posey's expectations as well. But like a good security company at an event like this isn't kind of like they're not supposed to be like a hired kind of a soldier of the person that is hiring them. They're supposed to be there to kind of maintain the security and everything like that. But yeah, these people didn't really seem like they knew what they were doing either way, like I think it was just like a bunch of people that got together to kind of like maybe they just do small time gigs here or there or whatever. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But they had set up barriers, but they were like really terrible, and just like the whole layout, like they're supposed to have like a security plan of like, okay, this is where the event is going to be. We've cordoned off this area. If there needs to be an exit, we'll go through here, whatever like that. There just was like none of that. So it ended up being She got in her car. The crowd was already like the park was already just full of people protesting her, like, you know, singing songs, like, you know, making a lot of noise and stuff. And she kind of got like pushed through this crowd, like just like squeezed through into the rotunda, where she was met by a handful of supporters who had it like, I mean, the security company didn't even check with the supporters that they were actually supporters, which is a little surprise tool that will help us later. But so
kind of
she,
similar to the security firm infiltration that your friend tried to do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
like,
so
just,
I think that's
there's
so
no
clever, by the
OPSEC
way.
at all. Yeah.
No OPSEC at all.
So they got her up, and she saw one of the people that had been organizing, like one of the locals that had been organizing for her was there, and she went up and gave her a big hug. And then in the people's champion, Ileana Rubeshkin, I think, who has come out since and has like been very, you know, public and vocal about like who she is and what she did and stuff. She so she had entered the rotunda with all the TERFs, and they had asked her, you know, like, oh, you know, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm here to show support, whatever. So they let her in. And yeah, so when Posey came up to hug this other TERF, Eliana stepped out from behind their big sign saying something, I don't know, some bullshit about women's rights or whatever like that, and dumped like an entire big thing of pasta sauce all over Posey's head. And the friend that was with her, and
pizza, pasta, put it on Posey.
I
love that shit.
Just fully, she pastaed Posey, and so which is where all the memes coming from, like pasta Posey, Posada Posey, Posey Posada, yeah, just all this kind of stuff. And the crowd just went wild. So totally dunked. The security kind of like pushed her away, copped a little bit of sauce themselves. I
love it when they cop a bit of sauce. I think like that's this is one of my like most joyous moments, is seeing like some of the most hateful people in the world just covered in some kind of messy food.
I know,
like it's like that ancient like evangelical who was like big in the 70s about the like the you know anti-queer groomer stuff, and she got like pied in the face, and then Andy Ngo with the milkshake, and Posey
There's that guy in Australia that got eggs.
The egg guy, and didn't he like slap the kid who did it? Just I think
it was like one of his guys like instantly just like started like choking this kid. But
there's something like embedded in our genes, like evolutionarily, that makes it like so food on bad person equals fun. Like there's I don't know, what is that?
Like,
humiliation. That's what it is.
Transcends all cultures.
And like with a lot of fascists and stuff, they're not gonna like, they don't care about arguing the points. They know that they're hypocrites and all this kind of stuff, but what they hate is being like embarrassed, you know, like that's like one of the most powerful things. Like that's what shuts them up, right? Being embarrassed.
One of the things we were shouting at the fash yesterday was like, no one can hear you. Do you know what I mean? Like literally no one can hear you. And then this like really, it was actually quite sinister sounding, I'm not gonna lie. Like as soon as they started talking on the mics, everyone just kind of started going boo, like really, really loud, and it was like so good. Like, you know, just like that shit works.
So anyway, carrying on from that, so she got chased out. Well, she had to get escorted out by police. They put her in the back of a cop car, and all the TERFs kind of there was the local kind of Christo-fascist church, Destiny Church, were having a rally down the street, coincidentally I think, but like, you know, whatever. So all the TERFs kind of ran down there, and we're like trying to kind of like, you know, seek shelter with, you know, like people that are fucking just really, really terrible. And so everyone just kind of followed them down and cleared them out from down there as well. And then so that night she was seen at Auckland International Airport, jumping on a plane, leaving the country. So yeah, she had to cancel her Wellington event. The next day, when the Wellington event was supposed to happen, everyone just turned out in the streets, and it just became a giant like street party. One
Awesome.
single turf showed up, I think, who was escorted out. So everyone was having a great time, and she was like trying to get in people's faces and stuff like that. And security were like doing their, well, you know, like just like the volunteer wardens were doing their best to be like, this woman is getting herself in trouble, like maybe she wants to get beaten up because you know, whatever. So they were trying to keep her out of trouble. And then yeah, they escorted her out with a bell, like a shame bell, while the whole crowd chanted shame.
Isn't that kind of like a Game of Thrones thing?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so she did do the
That's
shame
really
walk.
funny.
And yeah, but yeah, we, in the interest of moving along, we should keep going. So
Yeah.
Kira,
More good news.
why don't you tell us about the good news?
Yeah. So a bunch of lawyers have now vowed, I believe lawyers in England, vowed to not prosecute climate activists. So more than 120 lawyers have vowed to not act against activists from groups such as Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, who are exercising their democratic right of peaceful protest, which, you know, the wording, not the biggest fan of the wording. However, the fact that these demonstrators are getting arrested for actual peaceful protest, it's really cool that these lawyers are vowing to not prosecute them. They published a declaration of conscience, and they face the prospect of disciplinary action. So they definitely we're gonna definitely keep our eye on this to see how this progresses. But it's a really cool collective showing, and I hope more lawyers join in to participate. So Barrister Paul Polasland, who signed a declaration, said, quote, "We're refusing to advise fossil fuel companies on how to dig for new oil and gas the same way we wouldn't advise a killer how to commit serial murders," which is pretty scathing criticism of fossil fuel companies, and pretty accurate, you know? So there's a lot of, yeah, so they now face the prospect of disciplinary action for breaching professional regulations, such as the so-called cab rank rule, which I've never heard of before, which requires lawyers to take on any case within their competence. So really interested to see how this progresses.
Yeah, because that's supposed to be a thing to stop, you know, like like the idea is that it ensures like that people can get like legal help, legal protection and stuff, even if they're, you know, like they're not a great, you know, like even if they don't look like they'd be like a great client, or maybe they don't have like enough money or whatever like that. The cab rank rule is kind of just like, oh no, like, you know, it's your duty to kind of, you know, to take on the case and do it anyway. Which is, you know, like kind of like funny, where it's like a rule meant to help kind of, you know, poor disenfranchised people, or even people that are like, you know, have criminal histories and aren't the most appealing or whatever like that. But then it's being used in this case to be like, well, you know, like who will represent the petrochemical billionaires? You know? Which is funny.
That's funny. Yeah. Just FYI, the declaration has been organized by this group called Plan B. And so apparently some of the lawyers have already self-reported. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. But in a statement, Plan B, or in the statement, yeah, the charity said this is understood to be the first time in legal history that barristers have engaged in a collective act of civil disobedience. Tim Crosland, the director of Plan B, called for an end to the new fossil fuel developments, saying, "Behind every new oil and gas deal sits a lawyer getting rich, while ordinary people of this country take a stand." So
pretty solid analysis.
Pretty solid from a bunch of lawyers.
Bunch of fucking lawyers.
Bunch of fucking lawyers. But yeah, it's very, very cool, and we'll see. Like I said, we'll keep an eye on this situation.
Yeah. Shall I go ahead with this?
Yeah.
Stuff?
Could you tell us what's going on with Keir Starmer?
Oh, my pleasure.
Our sweet boy.
Yeah, our sweet boy.
Fan of the show.
He's a good friend of the show. Keith Starmer has been advised that he will lose his election campaign on day one unless he shifts his trans rights position. This is again something that I think we've commented on Red Planet, which is that Labour, having had like extremely progressive policies in the 2019 election where Jeremy Corbyn was leader, he literally did a campaign video where he said, "Hello everyone, my name's Jeremy Corbyn. My pronouns are he, him." You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't imagine Keir Starmer doing that in a million fucking years.
Sweetie.
He is a sweetie. He remains to be a sweetie despite having to be an independent MP. And in fact, one of the only MPs who was there on Tuesday to speak to his constituents about housing rights. My MP was not there in Westminster, and lots of other people's weren't, but Jeremy Corbyn was one of the only ones there. Anyway, about this story. So the Labour leader has recently changed his position after he said Scotland should not have made changes to its transgender laws. But 2 years ago, he said that Labour would introduce self-declaration for trans people. Sir Keir Starmer will lose the general election campaign on day one unless he shifts his position on transgender rights, party strategists have warned. Advisors have been telling the Labour leader since 2021 to, quote unquote, deal with the issue and explain to voters that self-ID is not going to happen. Sir Keir's position has evolved in recent days. An event in Stoke-on-Trent on Thursday, he said, I think that if we reflect on what's happened in Scotland, the lesson I take from that is that if you're going to make reforms, you have to carry the public with you, which is a lot of fucking nonsense, isn't it? It just doesn't mean anything. And I think that's a very important message, and I think that's why it's clear in Scotland there should be a reset of the situation. Just complete clownery from Keir Starmer.
It's like a Pete Buttigieg line, by the way. It's
yeah,
just like, what did you actually say?
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, politician nonsense. It's politics speak, isn't it? It's just nonsense to make people think that, you know, you have a position and you're going to do something or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just absolutely absurd nonsense. Like, you know, people are going to react to that in the way that these, strategists are telling him, which is they're not going to vote for Labour. In fact, you know, they'll vote for maybe even the Tories. You know what I mean? Like, depending on what their position on it is, which I doubt is going to be good. But will it be hard to make it better than Labour? Will they change it through fears that they may lose to Labour closer to the time of the election? Who knows? Anyway.
When is the election?
It's in 2024, so May 2024, I think. So yeah, he's got a year. He's got a year and a couple of months to sort his act out. Anyway, just wrapping up this news story. Yeah, this is obviously, like, you know, something he's saying now in contrast to a couple of years ago when, he said he was going to introduce self-declaration for trans people. A senior Labour source has told Sky News they fear the Conservatives will weaponise the issue at the general election. Absolutely, they will. The source suggested that Sir Keir's reluctance to explain his position may be due to a concern that he will upset younger Labour members. Well, I have a message for you, Keir. You've already upset them. Like, this is something that's already happened. On Thursday, the Labour for Trans Rights group released an email template for supporters to send their local MP voicing their concerns about Sir Keir's latest comments, which they say is signalling his intention to not support Gender Recognition Act reforms. It calls on him to commit to reforming the GRA, to stand by his previous commitments to LGBTQ plus people, and to stand on the right side of history. Trans rights are not a political football, the letter adds. So yeah, that's that for Keir Starmer. And we've not actually assigned this next news story to anyone, but do you want to do it, Tim? Yeah,
because obviously we're down a host, but that's cool. So Nebraska Dem with trans son vows to block all bills. No one in the world holds a grudge like me, she says. So this is Nebraska Democratic State Senator Megan Hunt. So this happened the other week. She vowed to filibuster every single bill for the rest of the legislative session after the Nebraska legislature advanced a bill that would ban gender-affirming care for people under 19. So, filibustering is basically when they just talk and like just talk, and they just go on, because there's like rules for how long they can kind of like debate each bill as it comes up, and and like debate and vote and all this kind of stuff like that. And yeah, it's kind of like a way for people to kind of I guess like dominate the session and prevent other people from being able to say and do things and vote and all that kind of stuff, because they can just like fully take up the entire time. And it's been used a couple times really effectively. Old Mike Gravel did it way back in the day, didn't he? There's like a bunch of stuff where it's like, like if you do and say certain things, you're basically allowed to just keep going. There are little kind of rules that they have to do. They're not allowed to say or do certain things, whatever.
I believe they can do like whatever,
also,
like for the most part though. Like I think they can even like read the phone book, stuff like that.
There is stuff like, it's like anything they read becomes part of like the public record as well. So people have used it to do certain things. Like actually it was Mike Gravel that used it to he read out the names of a bunch of donors and stuff like that, like people that were like that wanted to keep their shit secret, and by doing that he exposed it to the public record, so that everyone was like, oh, okay, these are the pieces of shit. So yeah, pretty sneaky little thing that people can do. So this legislation that's coming up, sponsored by Republican State Senator Kathleen Kalth, would ban minors from seeking gender confirmation surgery and hormone treatments, issues that could impact Hunt's transgender son. So Hunt is, Megan Hunt's the one that's doing the filibustering. She discussed her son and his testimony in committee on Wednesday, and to the wider body the next day. My son is trans, Hunt said of her 12-year-old child, who she says has been unable to attain gender-affirming care. And this bill, colleagues, is such an affront to me personally and would violate my rights to parent my child in Nebraska, which is like a big point for them, because I mean, not that like Republicans care about being consistent, but a lot of their stuff is about like, you can't tell me how to raise my child and all that kind of stuff. So she's saying like, this is my right to raise my child in the way that I feel best. So yeah, and also maybe just content warning, there is some kind of rough stuff here, so you might want to just chill out and come back in 5 minutes if you don't want to hear about some kind of some pretty heavy stuff. But yeah, so the bill is one of many anti-trans policies rolled out this year, according to Trans Legislation Tracker. We've made it clear that this is a line in the sand, Hunt said to lawmakers on Thursday. Hunt was scolded over her stance by Republicans, who said her pushback set a bad precedent. You really don't get it, Hunt said to Republican State Senator R. Brad Von Gillen. You've crossed the line and you've gone too far. Don't say hi to me in the hall. Don't ask me how my weekend was. Don't walk by my desk and ask me anything. Don't send me Christmas cards. Take me off the list. Hunt warned, no one in the world holds a grudge like me, and no one in the world cares less about being petty than me. I don't care. I don't like you. Hunt joins Democratic States Senator Michaela Cavanaugh and her promise to filibuster the remainder of the legislature's 90-day session, which ends on June 9th. I will burn the session to the ground over this bill, Cavanaugh warned. I will not give up on Nebraska children, she tweeted. Failure isn't an option, because if I fail, I'm failing children, and I'm not going to fail children. On Wednesday, Day cried in the chamber while reading a letter from a psychologist who said the bill will result in the deaths of transgender and gender diverse adolescents, likely before the end of the school year. Korth, who has another bill that would ban trans people from using bathrooms and locker rooms or playing on sports teams that don't align with the sex listed on their birth certificates, accused her Democratic opponents of using obnoxious hyperbole and said that they were being self-serving and childish with the filibuster, which is like so fucking like disgusting, because it's like, oh, you're being self-serving and childish. Like, they're literally doing something that is like within the institution of the Senate, this is one of the more kind of like powerful things that they can do, and they're doing it like in order to save the lives of children. And it kind of shows you how like people like Korth and other shitheads, Republicans, whatever, they don't they don't see trans people as being like actual people as part of their community or whatever like that. It's like it is just like a political football to them, you know, like it's a culture war thing. So yeah, pretty fucking disgusting from them. Yeah, and like the idea that it's like you're being like, you know, you're being unprofessional or something like that, where it's just like, what's, you know, like, what is the job at the end of the day? You know, you want to protect people, like they want to protect Nebraska children, and this is what does that. You know, it's yeah, it's fucking wild. Like, yeah, it's like it's this or it's fucking, you know, or it's, you know, like, not that I want to promote any particular activities, but it's like I think history has shown us if it doesn't end here, then it, you know, it ends in like car bombs and shit like that. So, you know, like they are very lucky that it is like fucking, you know, they're lucky that it's filibusters. Like they're lucky that they're like, this is the choice where they, you know, that things can be solved, right? But yeah, anyway, let's move on to some good news. Kira, why don't you tell us about what's going on in the Amazon?
Sure. And I just to say that was really good coverage of that story.
Well done, Tim.
Well done, Tim.
You killed it.
Absolutely. So Lula is ending illegal gold mines in the Amazon, which is pretty cool. Lula being based yet again. So Brazil has ousted almost all illegal gold miners from the Yanomami territory, its largest indigenous reservation, and will remove miners from 6 more reserves this year. And so the Humberto Freire is the director of the newly created Environment and Amazon Department of the Federal Police, marking what he called a new era in the battle against environmental crime and in defense of indigenous people in the rainforest. What I think is really interesting about this is that the police are not focusing on arresting minors. Instead, they're seizing or blocking the like 68 million reais. I don't know how to pronounce the currency of Brazil. So equivalent. Right. Yeah, it's equivalent to about $13 million. They're seizing or blocking this amount of money of resources belonging to those accused of financing the illegal miners while dismantling a prostitution network that took underage girls to the mining camps. I don't know, like police bad, but also if the means to which their Lula is going about this, I think it's not like just arresting like the lowest level people, which typically is what happens. It's going after like the people at the very top.
But it's like he is like, you know, like he is a state official and he's like, you know, operating in that capacity as opposed to, you know, like the capacity that an activist group might, you know, like act in or whatever like that. So it's like, yeah, police bad, but like Lula is doing his thing in his capacity, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So the territory has been invaded by thousands of gold miners, threatening communities with firearms, driving deforestation, spreading malaria, polluting rivers, scaring off wild animals. And this has all led to malnutrition and hundreds of deaths. So very, very bad. That's what it is. It's very, very bad. The Brazilian government is also studying new laws to stamp out illegal gold mining, which accounts for roughly half of Brazilian gold the country exports to nations, including Switzerland and Britain, which I did not know. Bolsonaro, our boy, friend of the show, Bolsonaro.
The avatar of disease and decay.
The world record holder of number of times you can get COVID and still somehow or just exist. Bolsonaro, who is expected to return to Brazil from Florida next month, could face genocide charges for his actions.
Which would be very interesting.
Yes, it would.
See how we could deny this when he is literally responsible for, you know, gutting the Amazon, literally genociding.
Did he like publicly
the
like
indigenous
he was very
population.
publicly for it? Like he wasn't. This wasn't like an underground thing. He was just very like openly like
no, he's like very,
this shit.
He was like all about it, like so it's kind of like if that just comes back and bites him, then that's very good.
Okay, we got one final news story to
one
go.
final story.
More
Mule,
shit.
Could you tell us about Paris?
I can indeed.
Thank you, Mule. I love you.
Kira, I love you too. So this is about the protests in France. We're keeping you abreast of the situation. And in developments this week, a Bordeaux town hall has been set on fire as the protests have continued over plans to raise the pension age. More than 1 million people took to the streets across France on Thursday, with 119,000 in Paris, according to figures from the Interior Ministry. You will have seen all sorts of stuff going on in France this week. You will have seen some stuff where there's been a tractor sort of going against a water cannon truck, which was very interesting. There's also been fires on the streets of Paris, and of course this now in Bordeaux. There's all sorts of stuff going on all over France at the moment, and it's really looking like shit is gonna pop off there. And like, I don't know, like it's already popping off, and you know, Macron is sort of I guess just like, you know, barging ahead with his idea to raise the pension age still, despite there being a vote in Parliament, or they wanted a vote in Parliament, but he said no, we're not going to do that. You know, just foregoing democracy as is his wont. Yeah, so very, very interesting moves. You know, police are firing tear gas at protesters. They've arrested 80 people across the country. But unions are still calling for more further protests next Tuesday, which would coincide with our boy King Charles III's state visit to the country. So I think that would be very pertinent, actually, that the French would protest the next time an actual monarch visits their country. But yeah, you know, we've seen a lot of other protests going on in France this week as well. It's not just the pension age protest. We've seen some climate change activists preventing a reservoir being built, which they say is going to damage the water table and damage the agriculture in the area, and just the wildlife in general. They've been preventing this reservoir from being built, and police, in response to this, you may remember the police found out that they are not very good at policing things in, I don't know, you know, countryside settings, rural settings where they sort of sink into the mud with the amount of heavy equipment that they've got. So what they did was they got some quad bikes and just drove past firing rubber bullets at protesters. That's very normal, isn't it? Very cool, very normal stuff there from the police, who just, you know, these climate activists just wanted a reservoir to not be built. So that's the news for this week. Well, I think that we did a pretty good job covering that, despite the lack of our beautiful, sweet Sophie. And I wonder if we'll do another great job of covering a little push of the Patreon. Oh my God! A
little cheeky push. A little cheeky push.
Little cheeky push. And yeah, so, you know, as you know, Red Planet is a show that is basically completely and utterly run by Conrad Zimmerman, who is our producer. He's a fantastic guy. We love him to bits, despite little cheeky joke, you know, a little cheeky bit of banter with him every now and then. But yeah, we basically do pay him with proceeds from our Patreon. We do ask you to consider becoming a patron, because there's loads of awesome stuff that you could get as a reward for being a patron. And I'll tell you about the first level of rewards, which is Sprite Mode, which is £2 a month, or I think it's $2.50. I think in New Zealand dollars, I think it's like $10 a month, or maybe
it's $4 for
$4. $4.
$10 would be pretty bad.
I always overstate the New Zealand dollars, yeah. But yeah, you could get started. Oh, it's $2 a month in
America.
Freedom Books. Get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite. Benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you're helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, and access to our awesome Discord. But Tim, why don't you tell us about our favorite? Well, it's not our favorite, but one of our favorite tiers.
The highest one is our favorite, but
That's right.
The second one is Goblin Mode, which in New Zealand dollars is $10 a month. I think it's $19 a month New Zealand. American, I think it's 10. And how much in Great British pounds is that? Is that like roughly like
it's
£9.50?
£9.50.
Yeah, $9.50. All right, and yeah, so everyone loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by doing goblin mode with. So you get everything from Sprite Mode, pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only places like that. and you get access to the exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts. So that's with the normal sprite mode, you get access to the Discord, but with Goblin mode, we do Discord hangouts. So yeah, we try and do them every now and then, just like kind of like watching a movie or a documentary, just as like a private kind of stream where we just hang out. It's a little bit more of a relaxed kind of chill vibe where we just kind of, yeah, just watch something and talk about it and, you know, kind of go over everything. And it's usually like pretty based stuff. So and sometimes some kind of like hard to find stuff as well. So yeah, pretty interesting and fun. But Kira, what about the next one? What about beast mode?
Sure. Beast mode at $20 a month, or in New Zealand. Oh no.
$38 a month.
And then
I had to scroll back to it.
Sorry. And in England,
£90.
Wow. Holy shit. Are you actually gonna go beast mode? Well, then we can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yep, pin badges. Wear your excellent new Red Planet pin badge literally everywhere. It is completely cool and good to do. Wow. But what if you want to be ultra cool? What if you want to be a sicko?
Well, I think if you wanted to be a sicko, you could go for our final tier, which is sicko mode at £94 a month, $100 US. What is it, Tim?
Or Tim is gonna
what is it?
I gotta like scroll back up. So then I gotta click the see more, and then it's okay. So it's $189 a month plus GST actually. It's New Zealand dollars. So that's quite
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, we got there in the end. So yeah, that is sicko mode, and if you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of every stream, which if you stay to the end of this stream, you will hear us thank our sickos. But that is the shameless self-promo segment done for today, and it's the news segment done, which can only mean one thing. We are going to be speaking to our guest next. So basically, there are a lot of things going on all over the world at the moment, but I think housing is indeed one of the biggest issues, not just in the UK, but all around the world. It's at the intersection of many different marginalizations. And if you are, you know, a young person in particular, and you're going to university, you are at the behest of what this institution has to offer you. And in terms of what universities have been offering the young people in the UK, the students who are going there, they are not good. We're talking, you know, infestations, damp, mold, in some scenarios, just literally holes in the ceiling with rain pouring in and all that nonsense. So some extremely based students in Manchester decided to take it upon themselves to do a rent strike and occupy some university buildings. And with us today, we have Fraser McGuire, who is one of those students. Fraser, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, hi. My name's Fraser McGuire. I'm a first-year university student at the University of Manchester. I've been very involved in the rent strike and the occupations alongside, well over 300 other students who are just completely fed up with what's been going on, both at this university and sort of with the national university system.
And you've been in national news this week, haven't you?
Yes, we have. I mean, it's not the first time the rent strike's been able to make headlines, but it was quite a special one this week. At roughly 5 a.m. on Wednesday morning, myself and roughly 20 other students who were occupying a university building were woken up to the sound of a door being torn down by about 15 bailiffs, all dressed as close to police officers as they can legally, coming in sort of body cams on, torches on, telling students like, you've got to get out now. Obviously, we don't want to just walk out, so we end up getting dragged or carried out by bailiffs. There's a lovely photo of me with four massive blokes dragging me out of this building.
That's a very cool photo, by the way. Not that it's cool that you got dragged out, but it's cool that you were resisting. And I'm very proud of you. Not to sound weird, but like I think it's cool as hell that you were, sorry to interrupt, but I'm really impressed. Like, it's very cool when you show this type of resistance, especially as like a first year student.
Yeah, it's massive.
It's really inspiring to see people, like younger people, really have no tolerance for this bullshit. It's cool as hell. Sorry to interrupt, by the way.
No, absolutely. I think it's and the amount of people who are willing to take a stand, it keeps everyone's morale up. You know, everyone's supporting each other, even people cracking jokes while we're getting dragged out of the building, stuff like that. I mean, we know what we're fighting for. And I think it's special about, especially students, younger people nowadays. There's so little faith in sort of the system and in the processes which we're supposed to achieve change by, which is that a lot of people understand that there isn't actually a way to achieve any sort of meaningful change without direct action, without collective action. I think that's been part of the success of building such a broad movement of students over the last few months.
That's awesome.
And Red Planet listeners, our Red Planet audience, will probably be interested to know that the team that evicted Fraser and his comrades from the occupation were actually the national eviction team that we've discussed on the show previously with activist Huda Amori from Palestine Action. And they, on their website, make a big show and boast about the fact that they have removed hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters, demonstrators, and travelers. So just to get this straight, they are proud of their ethnic cleansing, and that is literally oh yeah, and Sophie in the Twitch chat has just reminded us as well that they are also the same team that have evicted the London Macnavists, who we also had on. So, you know, we are becoming quite well acquainted with these. But let's take it right back to the start. Fraser, talk to us about why the rent strike movement happened, and yeah, just sort of like what the demands are and what you guys are hoping to get from the university.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that aren't aware, about 2 years ago there was a similar rent strike at Manchester. This was different motivations. A lot of it was caused by sort of the way the university treated students during COVID, and the use of metal fencing to try and keep them in their accommodation during lockdown. And that rent strike was extremely successful. So I think as a politically active first year coming to the university, I was already aware of the history of student activism at Manchester, which is arguably which goes back to the university's foundation.
Yeah.
A lot of first year students were already aware, and there are people in sort of third year and doing masters who were involved in the previous occupation and the rent strike, who we knew if we had issues we'd be able to go to for advice. From the start of coming to the university, it was clear that the combination of the cost of living crisis and really high rent in pretty substandard accommodation was massively impacting a lot of students. I mean, people talk about sort of, the student uni life experience, but that's something which is slowly disappearing in the face of sort of our economic crises. You always get these sort of tweets which are like, oh, I bet you all spent all your money on beer and stuff like that. And it's, well, maybe a pint now and then, but the point is most students are spending sort of 70, 80, 90+% of their student loan on their accommodation.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's terrible, really. We've done a lot of the maths. I mean, some of the accommodation we've got students in, you're basically paying £700 a month for a single room, which isn't catered, so it's self-catered, and you'll have a shared bathroom, which is utterly awful. But I think the real turning point from just people being angry into sort of a genuine people looking to actually, well, how do we change this? Was probably around the time of the publication of the university's finances, where they very proudly announced that they had doubled their academic surplus over their operating surplus over the last year, from a 60 million in 2021 to a 119 million pound surplus for 2022, which is absolutely huge. So as students sort of struggling to pay bills, struggling to be able to sort of go out, struggling to be able to afford meals for a lot of people, for the university to say we're really pleased to be making an 120 million pound surplus, I think that was just sort of the turning point, because people start to get really angry. I mean, students deserve to be able to go out. You're getting into tens of thousands of pounds of debt. You should be able to go and have a drink with some friends. You should be able to go and grab a coffee. That shouldn't be something you should be ashamed of. The shame should be for the university making over £100 million a year off the backs of students who are struggling during a cost of living crisis. That's where the anger really came from. And around the start of January, myself and a few other first years, with help from previous rent strike activists, began sort of organising and sort of speaking to other first years to try and get a rent strike going. And you can really see how much appetite there was for that, because we started on the 2nd of January. The rent payment was due on the 19th, and in that 18-day period, we had over 350 students sign up and declare they were withholding their rent, which is actually huge.
That's enormous. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is huge actually. I mean, I'm 19. At this age, you've never had that much, neither that much money. Nor
this is such a good. Oh, I love hearing that. I'm sorry. This is great. I'm having a blast. I'm so excited to hear this. This is awesome. I will not interrupt you again. I promise.
No. She will.
I was excited. I was excited as well. But no, it's brilliant. You can see the anger, and you can see almost the desperation of students, because a lot of people didn't have anything else to do. This is what the university doesn't understand, which is that this is students who actually, a lot of whom don't have any other option. A lot of people can't actually afford to pay their rent. So the rent strike, it was able to gather support from this anger, from this desperation of a lot of students. The university originally tried to cast doubt on the number, sort of saying, oh, we think the rent strike is sort of inflating it. So we did a freedom of information request. And it actually showed that by the end of January, there were over 900 students, 934 precisely, who hadn't paid their rent by the end of January. Obviously, a number of those were people who just sort of hadn't got around to paying their rent yet, hadn't made the manual payment. But the fact that the university was able to go to the national press and say, we don't think there's 350 strikers, at a time when there were actually over 900 people who hadn't paid their rent, just shows sort of how a huge financial institution like the University of Manchester is completely willing to go and lie to the national papers about
Wow.
Speaking of lies, Patrick Hackett, who is the I don't know what he is. He's like a secretary or something for the university.
Registrar, I think is official.
Yeah, registrar is the official term. But he seems to. I'm sort of skipping ahead here, but like, you know, in terms of like the occupation that you were evicted from, you know, there was a statement of solidarity, wasn't there, from the students' union, which I think that, what was it, over 10,000 students voted to support the rent strike or something like that.
Yeah, we had a huge referendum. I mean, we've had communication from, for example, the Chancellor of the university. They've said things like, "Oh, engage through the democratic process," because obviously that will solve everything. But really, the university's structure is very badly set up for students to actually demand genuine change. We say, "Go on, then. We'll make a point of this." So we called a referendum for students. Over 11,000 students voted in the single issue referendum, which is probably the highest ever. There was a similar turnout in SU elections about 8 years ago, but every single person that voted then got free chips and a drink, and we didn't do anything like that.
No incentive required, just sign here.
Yeah, so 97% of students voted to support not just the rent strike's demands and solidarity with the rent strike, but also to support the UCU, who are on strike, and to demand sort of cost of living payments for second and third years in private accommodation. So it shows how motivated the student body is, that you've got that many students voting just a 3-day period, while political turnout is often so low in student unions. It was amazing, really, actually seeing the results of that, and it's really showed the uni exactly actually what students think of senior management and what they think of the decisions senior management has made.
And in terms of senior management, this is why I was sort of setting up when I wanted to talk about this bit, is that Patrick Hackett, the registrar, has responded. He wrote a response to the referendum in which he claims that there was injury and intimidation done to the university staff during the occupation, which...
Oh, no.
Well, the thing is that we do know that comes with the job of being a security. So, you know, tiny violin anyway, if that did happen.
It's so funny, also... like intimidation for security, you know, like it's like intimidation is like like that's your job is security, like, you know, like if you,
Yeah,
like I mean,
yeah.
it sounds like a skill issue to me. You know?
Well, this is it, right? Because it's like, yeah, so they were saying that the students who, bear in mind, like Fraser, are mostly like first year students, you know, 19 years old, some probably 18 years old, and just like that's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, those are the people that are intimidating you. Okay, man, yeah, fair enough. And also, like, here's the other thing. I'm not saying that, you know, people of that age can't be intimidating, but you didn't actually do anything. Like, there's no evidence of this stuff at all, is there?
Oh yes, it's utter nonsense. I think it was around the 19th February. University security have been extremely sort of aggressive to students within one of the occupations. So a number of students decided to sort of come in, help them bring in some food parcels, stuff like that. During their entry to the building, the university, for some reason, decided it'd be a great idea to call up the police and say that students had essentially been attacking security. Quite a stressful night. Lots of police cars and vans showed up. But almost immediately as they got there, the police left because the moment they asked for sort of any evidence, I mean, where are these injuries, where stuff like that, the university was completely unable to provide them any evidence. I'm sure if there was evidence at all of any injury or saw anything like that, why has the uni not actually decided to pursue that? They've been very open about that in statements, but I mean, we've already been to court with the University of Manchester, so why are they not bringing this up? It's a complete lie. They're trying to drive a wedge between students and ordinary staff members, despite the fact that we're both fighting sort of against the marketisation of higher education. And it's utterly disgraceful, but unfortunately not unexpected from the university.
Yeah.
But I think, yes, it's disgraceful. The lies that they've told are awful. I mean, if they're going to talk about intimidation and injury, during the John Owens occupation, obviously we had some lovely barricades which were constructed, but I nearly had a filing cabinet pushed on me by a security guard on the morning when they were trying to breach in. And it was only when they realised that actually there was a chance of extremely seriously injuring a student that they stopped trying to bash down these barricades. Again, if they're talking about intimidation, when you're asleep on the floor of a university classroom, having the door ripped off its hinges and a bunch of people dressed like paramilitary police come storming in is actually not that fun and is also quite intimidating. So I'd like to see how Patrick Hackett would respond if bailiffs came and dragged him out of his house in a similar manner. I'm sure he would feel intimidated.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? So let's wind it back a bit because we've spoken a little bit about the rent strike, and that is really, really awesome. And I think it's important to point out this is something that Sophie, who is in the chat today, in the Twitch chat, but can't join us, she says that rent strikes are the most effective action against universities, whether the issue is housing, bigotry, institutional failure, or anything else, because universities' main business nowadays is landlordism. And you've done a lot of the maths around this. Your rent strike sort of well, it's an acephalous organization, and yeah, I wonder if there's any kind of information that you've sort of figured out numbers wise, because I know you said like before you found out that 900 students took part in the rent strike, and you can kind of, the rent strike's been going on since I think January, is that right? Yeah, you said January.
It's been going on since, yeah.
And so, you know, you could kind of make a guess at how much that has impacted the university's income. But yeah, have you done any other kind of maths to show like how much actual financial damage this has done to the university?
Yeah, it's a lot of it's difficult. Obviously, there's massive transparency and accountability issue with the university itself. But from the original Freedom of Information request, we know that at the end of January, there was £1.7 million in total in unpaid rent from students in university halls. Obviously, again, a significant proportion of that was likely as a result of students who hadn't just got around to paying. But a very significant amount of that was students who were actively making a political and conscious choice to rent strike out of protest of the university's actions. We estimate the total amount that rent strikes withholding is well over £500,000, and that there's over 350 students rent striking. The thing which I hope the university is worried about is in less than a month's time, on the 20th of April, we have our next rent payment date, which means that every student currently rent striking will then be withholding twice as much money, which will immediately go to over £1 million in withheld rent. But I think the amount of students who are planning on joining it, if anyone from the university senior leadership team is watching this, you should be extremely worried, because the amount of support and the amount of students who have said, you know, I didn't join the first time because I was quite scared about not paying a £2,200 debt. but now have seen our successes and have now seen that we actually have safety in numbers that are planning on joining. We could see well over 1,000 students consciously withholding rent, not to mention people accidentally doing it because they've not got around to paying, which could be sort of well over 2 million, maybe even getting on for £2.5 million withheld from the university. So I hope they are.
Based.
I hope they're aware of what's coming on the 20th of April.
Incredibly,
you have the best
awesome
attitude. Can I
Yeah.
say I love your attitude? It
Yeah,
brings me joy. It makes me amped.
Yeah.
You
Makes me
know,
wanna,
you would
like flip a table or something. I love it. It's great.
you would be so like, so you know, yesterday I was talking about how I went to like you know, bully some fascists along with some other anti-fascists down at the university, and like, yeah, just like the vibe that a lot of student activists have nowadays are just really, really awesome. I think Jay and Issa from the Laboratory of Interaction and Imagination will be really proud of you folks because things like, you know, having just like there was like two different arms of the protest yesterday. There was like people partying and celebrating queer culture and all that kind of stuff with like drag and dancing and this kind of stuff, and then there was the anti-fascists who were like bullying the obviously these people were anti-fascists as well, but like, you know, the anti-fascists who were, you know, willing to basically bully the fascists in the corner, like that sort of like double-pronged approach. There was someone going around with a bucket of cupcakes that I was offered that seemed really, really nice, but I, you know, I'm trying to be good. Yeah, just like people with like sound systems turning up, blaring jungle and stuff, like a real sort of party attitude. And I think that's what it's about. It's about like, you know, not just saying to people like, this is very, very serious and we're going to do this. So talk to us, Fraser, about the University of Manchester rent strike TikTok, because yous have been like popping off on TikTok, and I think that this is like really, really awesome.
Oh yeah, it's been brilliant. I mean, it's our most followed social media, even though it's the new one. The Twitter and the Instagram, we managed to sort of grab off the people who'd done the rent strike last time. You know, we were saying, you know, you've got a couple of thousand followers, so give us them.
Yeah.
But we decided, you know, socialism and organizing and activism in the 21st century, you need new tactics, and one of those is having a big TikTok account. I mean, we've got over 1 million views in the last week, sort of getting more than sort of major media platforms. And it's having a massive effect, because where do a lot of young people get their news? Where do a lot of young people sort of engage and interact with the media? It's on platforms like TikTok, and this is the University of Manchester's TikTok. They probably get like 300 views on some of theirs, but when it's made by young people and when it's made by activists, you can actually really reach out to people. I think a huge impact it's had is the amount of, especially current sixth formers, people who will be going to universities next year and are currently in the process of making the choice of where they're going to go to university next year. If they're scrolling on their TikTok For You page and they're seeing videos of sort of Manchester deploying bailiffs to drag students out, videos of sort of rats and mice in accommodation, and people going, yeah, I'm paying £700 a month for this, I can think there's one university that they're probably not going to want to go to.
Absolutely.
The University of Manchester reputation, as much as their direct finances, is at risk, and TikTok is actually been really effective in terms of sort of engaging people and in getting the message out there, because obviously the organizing is incredibly important, sort of building up the relationships between activists, but being able to get the optics, you know, being able to sort of get the word out there, shine a light on the issues within sort of the student housing crisis, within the marketization of universities, is also having a huge effect. And broader than the rent strike, we're helping to do that. We're helping to get the message out there. We're helping to get young people and students to actually see, like, not just what the issues are, but why are these issues here? Like, what are the systemic things which have led to the university system becoming so run for profit?
Yeah, I think that is so awesome. It's just like, yeah, so and like, it's good content. Like, this is the thing, like, if you're even remotely a lefty, or even if you've probably, like, I think, like you said, what about the sixth formers, I think is especially pertinent, because lots of people who are younger than university age, they may not be, you know, radicalized, they may not be even remotely interested in politics or have an inkling of like what's going on. I know that a lot of that is changing generationally compared to my generation. But certainly, like, there's going to be people who have no idea where they stand politically, who will watch this stuff and they'll go, yeah, that's pretty funny, and it's pretty based, you know, like this seems like good shit. So I think that's so powerful, and really, really
there's
cool.
like so many weird, there's like on TikTok as well, it seems like there's like a huge amount of people making like kind of, I guess, like some form of naive political content that is just like super reactionary and like doesn't actually, it's like the kind of stuff that people would watch it and be like, oh yeah, this seems like progressive or smart or whatever like that, and then it's really just like some conservative bullshit just wrapped up in kind of like vaguely progressive language. So it's always good to see like actual people and actual orgs that are actually out there doing something, creating kind of social media content that actually kind of like it has something behind it. It's like actually linked to real world activism and something that actually makes sense once you think about it.
So we've spoken about the TikTok, we've spoken about the rent strike, the numbers, the impact this is having on the university. So we reported on the occupation of John Owens when it happened. I think, was that, oh God, it was like February or something, or
8th of February we went in.
So talk to us about how it started and what happened and everything, because the way that it was like reported in the newspapers was super funny. So yeah, talk to us about that.
Oh yeah, it was an absolutely brilliant experience. So on the 8th of February, about probably 50 students in total occupied 3 university buildings. That was the engineering building, the Sam Alex building, which is sort of humanities focused, like lecture theatres, seminar rooms, and the most fun one, which I was in, was the John Owens building, which is senior management. That's a very important building, over 200 people working there, predominantly senior leadership team. It's got the Directorate of Finance, it's got the Vice Chancellor's office, it's got Patrick Hackett's office, it's got lots of really important rooms in there. And we managed to get in on the night of the 8th of February. We announced the 3 buildings were occupied that night on Twitter, which the university found out about very quickly. I think the funniest thing, and this hasn't actually got out into the media too much, is that when we announced it on the 8th, we only announced what 2 of the 3 buildings were. And in one of the court documents, which I've seen, the university wasn't able to work out that night which the 3rd one was. And it wasn't until the next morning, when everyone came into work in the senior management building and they couldn't get in because of the barricades, that they realized, oh no, like the 3rd one is like the most important building in the university, which was brilliant. I mean,
that rules.
Yeah, they've it was. I mean, students, you walk in, feels a bit like you're in a spy film. You wait till the building's cleared out at night, people have left, and the moment that's done, you come out. Obviously, it took a while to build the barricades. Carrying sort of around like heavy furniture and filing cabinets takes a while. But the fact that you've got a while till you get discovered is absolutely brilliant. It was a very fun experience. Barricade workshops will be the next thing coming. How to build a barricade with the furniture.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Like, I think the funniest thing for us is when one of the occupiers was questioned about it. They said, we just kind of walked in and nobody noticed that we just didn't leave. And it's when we're talking about like the security, and I'll ask you a bit about this in a sec, but like, the incompetence of the security, just in general, like that kind of like, is a theme here, right? With the occupation. So talk to us about like some of the things that the University of Manchester security did while you were there.
It's just massive incompetence. They sort of flicker between sort of over aggression, putting students at very serious risk, and sort of complete negligence of being unable to stop us walking into a building. They don't seem to be able to find a middle point. So they're either sort of putting students at massive risk, sort of trying to push like heavy furniture on top of them, stopping us getting food parcels into building, physically threatening like female students like at night when they're out by themselves. Near the occupation, or it's complete incompetence. I mean, it's stuff like us being able to wander into a building at night time and not actually be noticed. I mean, we had time to sort of cover up all this indoor security cameras before anyone had the chance to look at them. So we had 8 days of sort of free.
This is like it really is like a spy movie.
Yeah, literally.
Oh my God.
Oh, but it's
reminds me of there's an episode of that Workaholics show where they like barricade before they like hide in the office after hours and take a bunch of acid or something like that. It sounds great. It does sound like Ocean's 11.
Yeah, generally, I mean, and it's so much easier than people think, because the only thing stopping things like occupations happening more often is sort of people being unwilling to sort of technically break the law. Obviously, it's technically a civil offence, trespass, but it's barriers in your mind. It's not actually physical barriers that stop this sort of direct action taking place. Often, it's the fact that students aren't going to think, "Shall we wander into this senior management building and lock all the doors from the inside?" It's not actually the fact getting in there that's the hard part. I think that's been one of the things that's been so successful with this. Obviously, I've been involved in political organising before, but a lot of first year students, it's their first thing they've got involved with. And sort of being able to sort of break those sort of mental barriers, you know, being able to step outside the box of sort of like capitalist mentality of property rights and stuff like that, has had probably a lifelong impact on a lot of people, you know, being able to technically break the law, but because there's so many students involved, because it's mass collective action, actually there not being any sort of immediate consequences. Some people treat the law like it's a line, and once you cross it, you know, your life's gone. But the truth is, collective action, you can really sort of challenge these sorts of things, and you can challenge the mentality. And I think it's probably one of the most successful things that the rent strike has done, is help sort of politicize a lot of first year students who probably otherwise wouldn't have been as politicized, and really sort of help them get in touch with sort of actually getting involved in political organizing and a broader appreciation of sort of direct action. So it's been amazing, really.
Wow.
Just incredible. I think one of the funniest things that I saw, I think this might have been on like a Twitter post. It was something on social media, but like the the sort of like Soviet era style propaganda where you were like making paper airplanes and just like sending them down to like the security's car and stuff like that. I think that was the
fantastic.
funniest.
That was a fantastic night. That was I mean, it's pretty boring. There was a specific contract security guard who'd stopped us getting a load of food in earlier that day. It was one of my mates bringing the food down about quite late. I'm pretty sure it was after midnight. We just sat in one of these buildings on the 4th floor of John Owens. Realized you had a perfect view at this guy sitting in his car, just waiting to see if there's any sort of movement about. Big stack of paper. Turns out you can make a lot of paper airplanes in quite a short amount of time. I'm pretty sure after that he just moved further away, but we probably threw about 100 paper airplanes at him in about 3 minutes on the fourth floor of this university building. And it's amazing how it happens, because it's students actually being able to sort of have fun, you know, keep morale up, stuff like that in the occupation, and then sort of to be honest, like pretty nasty contract security people who've been going out of their way to sort of make students in really uncomfortable and difficult situations having a really awful time, actually. So we were having a lot more fun than some of these people who've been going out their way to sort of stop us getting food, try and make us sort of stress, put us at risk, really. So yeah, that was definitely one of the highlights of John Owens, was the paper airplane incident. It was excellent.
So good. And yeah, I think like just the whole movement has been just so good, so progressive. You know, like you said, like politicizing the other students, you know, making sure, like, I think what you said is so poignant, breaking down the barriers in your mind. I know Sophie will appreciate me saying this, but it's like what Morpheus says to Neo in The Matrix, which is that, you know, they will never be as strong or as fast as you, because their world is bound by rules, and we know to bend or break them, right? And that might sound like a silly analogy, but it just goes to show that, like, you know, if you live your life in, I guess it would be right to call it the neoliberal mind prison, which is that, like, there is nothing better to achieve, and individual is the only thing that we should be trying to better and think about, rather than the collective community, then you're never gonna escape capitalist realism. And I think that's also a really important thing that you said, that, like, you know, you're breaking the like the mind barriers of you know, capitalist thinking. Like, you're thinking like we could have a world outside of capitalism. Have you read Mark Fisher at all, or is that just something that you like came up with?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a bit of Mark Fisher, but I think that as well is when we've sort of been having sort of these. I mean, there's a lot of sort of political discourse and discussions you have when you're in an occupation, and I think, I mean, I'm quite big into my science fiction. It's the Ursula Le Guin quote of the power of capitalism seems inescapable, but so did the divine right of kings. So any human power can be resisted and changed by other human. You know, they're just systems which we've created, and they can be deconstructed by us. That's probably been one of the most important bits of these occupations is sort of having this space, especially in the Simon Building, which obviously lasted over months, just having this sort of radical and progressive space on the university campus, which is completely run and controlled by students. And it was absolutely brilliant. You know, over 100 in Simon, over 150 people took part in that occupation at some point over the month and a bit that it was going on. It was absolutely fantastic. We were holding sort of radical workshops on sort of a massive range of subjects, holding sort of like know your rights trainings, everything like that. And it was just an incredibly powerful thing we were able to do. And the amount of students I think it would have had an influence on is brilliant. I mean, something we like doing now is if students are going to have a meeting in the university building, where that's sort of like an assembly to discuss something political or just a broader meeting, you don't book out a room anymore. You just find a room that's empty and you just go and take it for a bit. It's even little things like that. It's changing, it's breaking the rules, but it's you doing it in a group, and I think it's been absolutely fantastic, really.
I mean, all laws they're just guidelines anyway, you know. They're just...
of course, here on Red Planet, we do not encourage people to break the law, but
they're only real when they're being enforced. If no one's there actively enforcing them, then it's like,
It's true. So in terms of the workshops that you guys were putting on in the John Owens building, tell us some more about that. Tell us about like what kind of things you were teaching people, what kind of things you were doing in the occupation workshop.
So John Owens was the one. We didn't do any occupation workshops in John Owens. They were Sam Alex and Simon when they were ongoing, as they were the ones sort of with the best spaces for it. Obviously, the barricades to John Owens it was too difficult to get people in and out. But yeah, Sam Alex and Simon, it was a huge amount of workshops. I mean, students were actively sort of invited to sort of take the lead on things that they were knowledgeable about. I think one of the best ones was the Know Your Rights training, which was sort of a 2+ hour sort of discussion on sort of how the police operate, how you can stay safe in sort of protest situations, sort of the basics of sort of knowing your legal rights. That was fantastic. Probably more than 50 students came along to that workshop. You even had a couple of people come along from other universities in the country, not ones too far away, but sort of take part and sort of come into this radical activism space. We had people from sort of systemically oppressed groups coming in and sort of just actually having sort of really open discussions with people about how sort of you can challenge sort of systemic oppression and sort of systemic discrimination in society. I mean, it's difficult to actually sort of think which the best ones were, but it's between the film showing sort of the different workshops, it was brilliant for sort of challenging people's worldviews, getting to come along to these, but also giving them practical skills. Like, what do you do at a protest? You know, if there's a snatch squad going for someone, if there's a kettle starting, and some of these were put to quite good use yesterday when all the police were starting to surround people at the anti-fascist demo.
That was really awesome to see how everybody clocked that a kettle was being attempted straight away.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because that's like one thing that is like, you kind of you need like most people
Tim did a video on kettling. You kind
of need most people involved to kind of know what they're doing and to kind of know what like what a kettle is and stuff like that. Because if like one person goes, oh shit, they're kettling us, and then everyone starts panicking and like people start doing shit like that, it's all over. It's like so that's amazing that that you were able, that someone was able to teach people that, and that you were able to put it to good use. Because
just on that,
one of the harder things to do in like a kind of protest environment.
The title of the video is How to Survive and Thrive in a Hypothetical Dystopian Street Battle, Kettling, and it's on Tim's channel, Conquest of Dread. So highly recommend the video.
That was something that was really interesting to see as well yesterday at the anti-fascist protest. I didn't speak too much about this earlier when I was talking about stuff that I've done this week, but like, when the police realized that we knew that they were trying to kettle us, they changed tactics almost immediately, and then just kind of like tried to like basically make a big line around the fash. I thought that was really, really interesting. So like, I don't know how prepared they are for people to turn around and go, oh, they're kettling us. Because people were saying it quite loudly. They were saying like, watch for the kettle and shit like that. And all of a sudden, they just went, oh, okay, let's do something different. I saw like the officer who had like a red thing on their shoulders, sort of going in between two different groups of police. So she was obviously like some kind of tactician or something. But yeah, I think that was a really interesting response. Just something for the audience there to consider about this kind of stuff. But yeah, okay. So I think it's I definitely think it's good to talk about that as well, because like this is as you said, Fraser, like you've politicized a lot of students who are probably not political. They probably never thought about politics, or if they have thought about politics, they've definitely not thought of anything outside of electoral politics. And they are coming into this, you know, brand new world, and they've got a lot of amazing, awesome ideas. And I think that is something that's really important. I think that like as you get older, you start to be like, no, these are things that work and we should stick with this and da, 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 da. But then in terms of like the creativity and imagination of younger people, I think is something that definitely shouldn't be like stunted in regards to direct action and shit like that. And this is something that you lot have shown, not just with the TikTok, but also like, you know, utilizing the spaces, as you've said, to do like, you know, training and know your rights sessions, all this kind of stuff. And obviously like also like hosting places for marginalized people to come and talk about their issues too. So do you also, in terms of like, just what you're seeing with the vibe in students at the moment, are you seeing more of like a, I guess, how would I call this? Like, innovative sort of ideas? Are you seeing like new ideas being discussed that you've not heard of before? And like, you know, is there like a lot of sort of creative direction that's going on here, or are you just kind of relying on old stuff?
I think there is a huge amount of sort of new and sort of especially like very radical ideas coming about. I mean, students have often been sort of at the forefront of sort of radical action and ideas, sort of simply like offer a combination of having a load of young people in a small space, people who are sort of haven't yet sort of made any sort of peace with sort of the status quo or anything like that, and a lot of whom are especially doing sort of subjects which really make them question stuff, you know, sociology, stuff like that. It creates sort of a really radical atmosphere, and I think when that's combined with I think there's quite a widespread sense among people of my age, especially, of the fact that the system is completely broken and it will continue to be broken for us. I don't think, for example, that thing you always hear people say about, oh, you're going to get more conservative as you get older. I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, part of the reason I think people have said that is because historically, every single generation has been better off than their predecessors, pretty much, until my generation, which is significantly worse off than my parents. And I mean, I'm not going to retire till the 2070s, 2080s. By that point, with climate change and I can't imagine what the world is going to be like then. When the university threatens things like, oh, we're going to get, you know, we might impact your credit scores, stuff like this. No one my age is going to own a house. I mean, it's a joke, but at the same time, it's not a joke, because the reality that young people are facing is completely different, and the challenges we're going to be up against in the future are going to have to completely reshape people's worldviews. I mean, people aren't ready for even sort of probably the next decade of political, economic, and sort of environmental change that's going to come about. So I think this is part of the reason why you are really starting to see sort of both sort of in intellectual and academic circles, but also just in sort of broader organizing and activism, sort of so many sort of new techniques and ideas coming about, as young people are realizing, well, there's not a way of making this political change to any of these systems we currently have. And it's not necessarily going to be brilliant. I mean, there's going to be a lot of bad stuff happening, but it's going to be fascinating sort of seeing how sort of student youth movements are going to evolve.
This is kind of what Red Planet is all about, really. We are desperately trying to educate people on how to make that transition to this dystopian world that you describe, from this dystopian world that we live in right now. How to make that transition, you know, a little easier, because, or at least make that world not dystopian, because, you know, there is every chance that, you know, by people coming together, you know, organizing in revolutionary manners, building dual power, you know, this is the way that we actually make the world a better place. And I think that you can have like a bit of a, what is it, the absurdist nihilist sort of worldview of this anyway, even if you are very doom-pilled, where it's like, well, maybe there's no point in doing anything because we're on a meaningless rock in the middle of space and nothing makes sense and it's all bizarre, but also why not try and make things better for future generations, or even, you know, our generations or people who are still here in later generations, because, you know, that is just our experience that we have. And, you know, I think empathy is extremely based and important, right? So it's extremely good to know that, like, you know, yous who are like, you know, first year students at Manchester University are doing all this base stuff like rent strikes, know your rights sessions, anti-fascist demonstrations, counter protests, you know, all these awesome things, when I was just getting super fucking high in a shitty little you know, flat in South Manchester. Yeah, really, really inspiring, actually. So yeah, in terms of like the vibe at university as well, I think another thing that I'm really interested in is, you know, do the students there like, oh, actually, no, because you've mentioned this already about the solidarity with UCU, and this is a massive thing for the rent strikers, right? Because you mentioned this earlier that like, and I think that maybe some people don't really know what you meant by that. So do you want to explain the rent striker solidarity with the UCU?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And people watching that don't know, sort of the UCU is sort of our university and colleges union in the UK, which represents sort of tens of thousands of sort of academic and university staff. And they've been taking sort of a lot of strike action. It's been sort of in waves over the last few years, but it's especially sort of intensified over the last sort of 4 or 5 months. So there's been massive erosions to sort of people's pensions. There's been messing around with pay, real terms pay cuts, and some awful action on sort of people's working conditions by universities nationally. So university staff are hugely impacted by the broader marketisation of higher education, which is also hugely impacting students. The average the average staff member at the university manages on around £27,000 a year. Most of them who have gone through maybe sort of 6-7 years of sort of quite grueling sort of academic sort of education. Have done masters, a lot of them have done PhDs, and that's when you have sort of senior staff who are sort of on 250,000 plus making all these decisions that affect both students and staff. It's so important that sort of students and staff realize that we're in the same boat. And this has been something that's, I think, has been incredibly successful with the rent strike, is the way we've worked with and alongside the UCU. Whether that's been encouraging people that are rent striking to also go down to picket lines just to show support for UCU members. And every bit of solidarity that we've shown them, we've been shown back. We've had UCU members and university staff donate to fundraisers, bring food along to occupations, which we've been able to sort of hoist in windows with like a bag attached to some rope. And
that's amazing.
That was one of the most fun bits, is getting brought some pastries by UCU members. But it's, I mean, it's really what solidarity is about. I mean, the two struggles that we're in might have sort of quite different things. I mean, we're struggling against high rent, they're struggling against like pensions cuts, pay cuts, working conditions, but it is part of the same broader fight. And so many students and so many UCU members have especially sort of really started to take note of that. It's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, when we got evicted from the Simon building at 5 a.m, rather than going home and go to sleep, although probably I would have enjoyed doing that, we grabbed a McDonald's breakfast and then went down to the UCU picket lines at 8 a.m.
Oh my God, it's cool
stand
as
with some of my
hell.
lecturers and academic staff who were out. I mean, a lot of them were quite impressed by the story of saying, we just got carried out of that building over there. But yeah, I mean, it's massive, and it's showing students what solidarity is about. I think the wave of strike action we've seen in the UK has also played quite a big role in being able to get students to take part in the rent strike. Because sort of just the idea of strikes and the idea of collective action has been much more sort of pushed into the mainstream media. When we've had extreme sort of articulate working class people like Mick Lynch being able to go on the TV and sort of flip the debate on its head away from what sort of the right-wing media would like it to be, it has had a pretty big impact, I think, as union membership is starting to climb again in the UK. We've seen the RMT win a 14% pay increase and get a deal on sort of network rail, stuff like that. So the strike action, which the broader labour movement has been doing, has sort of been able to pass on, has like had an imprint and an impact on the mindset of students, and I think that's had a big impact on the rent strike, and especially working with the UCU. I mean, that's why we included in the referendum for the university to also recognise the UCU demand. So now passed by 97% of the students. It's official student union policy, and Manchester's the largest student union in the UK. That policy is now for the university to actively support all of the UCU's demands as well as the rent strike. So I think that's been probably one of the most amazing bits about it. And have some good banter with some of my lecturers and seminar people as well about the occupation and stuff, because they love it. They understand that we are supporting them throughout this, and we know that they are supporting us when we're facing disciplinary action, when we're facing the threat of action from the university. We know that our staff are standing alongside us because it's part of the same struggle, and it's what solidarity is about.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you've seen like support from your professors and stuff like that?
Yeah, really. I mean, obviously, there's some sort of who might not really take part in strike action, but for the vast majority, they really do understand. I mean, they have huge issues with the way they've been treated by this university.
I would imagine.
It really speaks to them to see students being dragged out of a building or being sort of publicly insulted by like senior management who've apparently got nothing better to do than argue with sort of 18 and 19-year-olds. So it's been sort of amazing, and despite the university's attempts to sort of drive a wedge between us and staff, sort of they put out statements on StaffNet and stuff like that, being like, "Oh, we're worried that students in occupied buildings might be going through like your private offices, or we're worried that this or that." They're trying to drive a wedge, but we've reached out. We actually did a statement at one point saying to sort of staff, like to ordinary staff, just saying like, if you normally work in the Simon building at Sam Alex, something like that, and you have it in any way disrupted, we are like, obviously we're very sorry. Disruption is very difficult to get around, but every action we take is targeting the senior leadership team. We are standing up for you. Our demands are the demands which you're asking for in your union, and we will not sort of be doing any of the things that the university is trying to allege that we've been doing, like saying, "Oh, what if they go through your drawers? What if they like take your laptop or something?" It's like it's nonsense. It's just the university trying to break it, because they know that students and staff as a sort of collective body is incredibly powerful in the university, because that's sort of 95% of the people who are in the university system. So it's just been amazing sort of being part of that and seeing the solidarity between staff and students.
That's amazing. I want to go back to a comment that Sophie wrote in the Twitch chat. She says, every time we interview young people, we find out we're about 15 years out from a full-scale global revolution. And from like what you're saying with your collaboration with the UCU, like the solidarity you're seeing across organizations, across like specific goals, but still recognizing your class, like what class you all belong to and what that means. It's I mean, I think she's right. I mean, it seems like some really, really cool shit is happening in people that are younger, and that transcends just that group. Like, I'm getting inspired, and I'm not of your age group, but it's very, very cool to see. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the upcoming few years, although it's going to unfortunately be a bittersweet thing, because, you know, it's just with the collapse of a lot of these systems and like, you know, the advancement of climate change. Unfortunately, it's going to inspire a lot of that solidarity as well. Well, we would hope, right? So it's very, very cool to see what's going on with you all.
And in terms of what kind of you know, I guess what the main thing that I would say, because you've done such a good job already. You've already like done all of the things that we would normally ask guests about, which is like, you've explained like how to get involved with something like this. You've explained why it's important. You've you know, talked about like the different you know, intersections that you've like, you know, gotten involved with and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like I'm just like struggling to like think of like, you know, what else do I want to know from you? But I just remembered, actually, it's there is a strike fund, is there not? Or is that something I've got wrong?
Yeah, so we've got sort of a solidarity fund. Sort of that's mostly for sort of especially sort of putting some students' minds at risk, because obviously the university has been threatening sort of big fines, both for ordinary rent strikes and people involved in the occupations. So yeah, we have got sort of a solidarity strike fund. We're not entirely sure what all of it will be used for, but the majority will be going on fines. It'll be going on sort of providing protection. There's one point in John Owens where the university was trying to completely stop us getting food, where we had to consider like spending some of that money to like get some food in, issues like that. But yeah, we have got that. It's on the rent strike Twitter and stuff like that. And it's been overwhelming, actually, the amount of support we've seen, because obviously financial support for people is hugely appreciated, as a lot of students don't have I mean, one of the things the university's done with the rent strike is they threatened every single rent strike with a £25 fine. which isn't that much sort of in comparison to the amount of rent we're paying. But a lot of people don't have sort of £25 in disposable income to pay. So we are also essentially doing a fine strike, which is that we're also not paying that £25. But yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I strike that.
Keep
Yeah,
going.
they also threatened, you said this earlier about they've also threatened like credit score stuff, right? With like saying that like, oh, they're gonna send debt collectors round and stuff like that, and all this kind of stuff. And again, this is like, you know, I personally, I've seen the letters that they've been sending to students, and it's like, as someone who is a housing activist, and I understand, you know, what sort of procedures people have to go through before they start doing these things. I kind of know how that works. Yeah, they're just kind of chancing it, really. They're just kind of like trying to put the shits up students, because again, like you said, even if they did get debt collectors involved, debt collection agencies, to like, you know, harm your credit score, yeah, yous aren't getting mortgages, you know what I mean? Like, you know, no student is under the impression of like, you know, the false impression that like, oh yeah, one day I'll own a house. Like, I'm a fucking 33-year-old, you know, fairly privileged millennial, and I know I'm not gonna fucking own a house, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't understand what the fuck they think they're even doing here. I think it just really shows how far removed from reality they are, in terms of like that kind of stuff. And yeah, what's your take on that kind of, those kind of threats?
I think it's, well, first of all, I think it's disgraceful from the university, because obviously a lot of students, the cost of living crisis sort of massively sort of compounded mental health issues. Over 60% of sort of UK students have sort of said that they're, just in the last few months, sort of their mental health has sort of deteriorated quite significantly as a result of sort of the combination of cost of living crisis and substandard accommodation. For the university to sort of make the sort of threats that can, to be honest, terrify students who might be sort of feeling vulnerable is absolutely disgraceful, that they would try and do that rather than engage. I mean, I think if there was sort of any humanity in these decisions that was being made, if there was any sort of factor other than sort of cold hard profit, the university would at the very least open negotiations rather than try and, if your immediate response to someone telling you that they have a massive issue, that they're sort of getting desperate about like their financial situation, if your immediate response is, rather than even negotiate with them, is to try and scare them, it's to try and sort of put pressure on them by threatening sort of all sorts of legal action, I think it says everything you need to know about the university. I think one of the worst things they've done in terms of scaring people is there's a specific email that's always sent out. It's been sent out for years. We've spoken to second and third years, fourth years about this, and it is after the exam period, and you get an email, and at the bottom of it, it normally says, if you have tuition fee debt, you can't see your grades. The university for this year, because of the rent strike, decided to rephrase it into, if you have any debt, you will not be able to see your grades. That's not true. They can't do academic punishments for unpaid rent, but the university intentionally, I mean, they've changed the wording.
Scumbags.
Yeah, people trying to get people. They're making so many sort of they're sort of alluding to things which they know they can't do, but they know that sort of the average 18, 19-year-old isn't going to understand. I mean, we're not going into this with sort of massive knowledge of sort of property rights and the legality of stuff. So the university is just trying to scare people with stuff that they can't actually do by implying that they can. Like that, for example, they implied in an email that like your credit score can be affected before a third party agency has been involved. That's just not true. That's not how the contracts work. But they know that most students won't know that, and they are just trying to scare people. I mean, it's disgraceful. The current thing they're doing, I've not had one yet to my door. It'd be funny if I had it during this, but they've been going printing out these emails now and slipping them under students' doors, just because that's more scary, and it will make people think like, oh no, like I mean, it's not nice when you know sort of you've got unpaid rent, you're part of a strike, to sort of feel like you're being targeted, sort of getting a letter slid under your door. We've had people get them at sort of like 11:15 at night or very early in the morning from university staff. It's disgraceful, really. That I think it boils down to that, which they don't want to negotiate, and they will just try and really negatively impact the mental health of students to try and get people to pay. But I think the union's going to be unwilling to actually take some of the action they're threatening. We've seen the backlash of them evicting 11 students from an occupied building. Not 11, it's 11 that's going through disciplinary action, around 20 that were actually evicted. But we've seen how bad the backlash to that has been. If they try and evict 300 students from the place where they're living, The university, I don't think they would actually be able to do that with their reputation. So they are just trying to scare people because they know they're sort of backed into a bit of a corner. They know they're not going to throw 300 students out onto the streets for like protesting the cost of living crisis, which is pushing people to the point where they can't afford rent. So they have nothing to do but to try and sort of scare people, to play on people's sort of anxiety with stuff like this. Yeah. It's just awful that that's how they are responding to both a mental health and a cost of living crisis, is trying to scare people rather than negotiate. And there's been no negotiation with the university. They've been very clear that they are not negotiating with rent strikers or students that are involved.
I feel like it's not only a fear that they're trying to prey on, it's this expectation that when they say something, because they are an authority figure, that the lowers will just listen to them and just go, okay, whatever you say, because this is a relationship. This is this authority, and or benefiting from that position of authority has been historically, a thing that these like ruling class members have been able to do. So that now these new generations are starting to question that in really profound ways. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. I don't want to undermine that point. It's not just the things that they're saying that's specifically just trying to scare you, but it's also because they just wrote something on their letterhead and said, you need to do this thing. It could be anything. They're expecting that you are afraid of that, just respecting that authority figure that they are. I think it's so great that you're not. Like, I think it's really awesome that you're just not respecting that authority that they think they're owed. They think that you owe them that respect.
This is certainly something that I see with private renting students who are outside of halls and stuff with my work at GMTU. And that is that, like, if a student complains about their living conditions, they are often ignored. They are often they have these like really bad channels through which to do stuff that are just like layers of bureaucracy that are turned into apps nowadays. So like, if you're with like a certain letting agent, not naming any names, but there's a lot of fucking big ones in Manchester that do this. They have like an app where you can like register like an issue, and some fucking private renting students that I've been on disputes with have said that as soon as they label this disrepair issue, they click send, it then automatically pops up as like dealt with. So it's like, they don't even like respect the students enough to actually like say, all right, we'll come and investigate this. So, I think, and I've sort of entertained this idea because I do think there's an element of youth liberation here. I do think there's an element of ageism that is going on. I know ageism is commonly used to talk about when people, attack older people, but I think it's definitely true for younger people. I think that younger people experience a kind of oppression that is very unique, where it's like, you're just told this is what reality is. This is how I was fucking spoke to when I was a kid. This is how it is. You grow up, you get a job, you fucking die. That's it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, what a shit life. Thanks for birthing me. You know what I mean? But like, I think that comes alongside with how these institutions deal with people. Do you hear a lot of sentiment of that amongst the rent strikers, Fraser?
Yeah, I think massively. I mean, people are just as worried about what's going to happen next year, almost as they are this year. I think, as well as the point you made sort of about private landlords and how much of an issue it is, there's so much collaboration, which is that if private landlords increase their rent, the university will use that as a justification to jack it up in halls, because they'll go, well, look, we're trying to keep in line with sort of the average increase in student areas in private accommodation. But then that in turn gives the private landlords a thing to say, well, look, the student halls have just gone up because the university's done this, which means it's okay for some of them. So there's almost this sort of collaboration of landlordism within most student cities and student areas, where even if it's informal, there'll be sort of a working together of the way that rent is increased between both purpose-built student accommodation and private accommodation. And it's you really see it, how sort of competitive the rental market is. Obviously, it's an issue that's affecting millions of people across the country, but student areas, it's often being it's sort of at the absolute forefront of the rental crisis. You're expected to, within roughly probably 2 to 3 months of starting university in first year, you're expected to have already put down sort of the deposit on your house for the second academic year, and already chosen who you're going to be living with that second academic year. And the competition is pretty it's pretty awful. I mean, you have a house viewing, and it won't be your group. It will be sort of 30 people all at once, sort of wandering around this house, and then someone will probably sign there on the spot. So there's this utterly huge competition within sort of the student private market, and this is something that a lot of students are worried about, because it's obviously the rent strike. Part of it is being able to sort of fight directly against the University of Manchester, while there is this much broader issue of both obviously the housing crisis within society, but the way that it impacts students often at a disproportional level. See, I've seen that a lot, and it's something which a huge amount of students are worried about. I think while there is a lot of optimism, it really makes people feel almost quite hopeless about like people talk about, especially older generations talk about sort of getting on the housing ladder. I mean, that's not going to be, that's almost a redundant concept.
Yeah.
And now we're the largest private renters generation since sort of the invention of like the aeroplane and stuff like that. Like the last time you had this large of a section of society at this age sort of in private renting, often paying as much as people are for mortgages, was sort of during the late Victorian era. And it's a huge issue, and it's a massive contradiction sort of within society, because it's something that isn't going to get solved through any sort of like, no one is currently proposing a solution to it.
Get them to join GMTU. That's what I'd say, because we love making landlords cry.
Yeah, we had a GMTU like stickers and some leaflets down at some of our rent strike events, so to make sure that once people are out of halls and they're into their private accommodation, you have to get in the tenants union. You know, you join your trade union for your collective organising in the workplace. But if you're doing that in your workplace, why would you not do that in the place where you live? So tenants unions are incredibly important, and it's something that's really important for people to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know one comrade from the union who's been involved in the rent strike and been involved in all this kind of stuff, and it makes sense. It makes sense that you would like look at what a tenants union is and get involved and what have you. But yeah, like I think that is a really important thing to talk about, is this, like, you know, absolutely absurd, unhinged, competitive market for student accommodation, especially private student accommodation. Like, this is one thing on a dispute that I've been in. Well, actually, there's a number of renters from this particular letting agent. I'm not ashamed to say who they are, because this is kind of what direct action is about. But Mazzino Properties, I would steer clear from them if I was anyone going into private accommodation after halls, because they have a show apartment that they show people. Which is obviously the one that is the most looked after. It's the one that is the most cleaned. It's the one that doesn't have any issues, etc. But even in that same building, there are rodent, silverfish, mice, mice and rat infestations. There's mold. There's like one tenant told us that there was like a bubble of water that had formed from a leak on the ceiling.
I am familiar with the bubble of water in the ceiling.
You know? Yeah, I've seen those.
That was my last apartment. We had to like
drooping down.
We had to like stab it every winter to like let it like drain. It was a whole thing. We called it house water.
Monster boil.
Like some house water. It's fresh house water. Yeah.
Anyway, filter it, you know, send it off. I don't know. No, I probably don't do that. But yeah, just like this gross conditions. And, you know, we've had students who have been in properties where it's even worse than that, where there are like holes in the ceiling, where there has like been carbon monoxide leaks, and they've not been like rehoused overnight to actually deal with this, which is something that is like, it's illegal. You know, these landlords, they don't follow the law. Like, the law is made for them, innit? You know what I mean? So they act outside of it. So yeah, I think extremely important to for any students who are watching this who are worried about private accommodation, like, get involved with the tenants union. And GMTU have also, like, we've also said, like, you know, if the university makes the hellish mistake of trying to evict 350 plus rent strikers from halls, we would absolutely do eviction resistances in solidarity with students, because, you know, I think that's one thing that I just don't think they'd have the resources for. Like, and let's sort of go back to that, because they got this incredibly expensive, mind you, security firm NET, the National Eviction Team. You know, they know that they are working for corporations, because on their website, if you look at what they talk about, they say like, oh, what does the law say about evicting protesters from my my business, my place of business, and obviously that's what the university is. They say, oh well, if it's private land, you know, you've got to hire us because the cops can't get involved. And it's like, well, yeah, you know, like that's kind of, you know, that's kind of what they're advertising. So, you know, they will have spent thousands of pounds, or, you know, hiring these fucking Stasi, Freikorps, you know, Nazi bastards to drag you out of the university buildings. And, you know, they could have just sat down and negotiated a deal. Like, it just makes no sense, even from a money-making perspective, you know, and they've lost so much money already, and they're spending more money. It just doesn't make sense. And if they wanted to like evict 350 plus students from their accommodation, that would be such a drain on the resources. I think even hiring a debt collector firm to go around these 350 plus properties would be such an absurd waste of resources that they could easily prevent by just negotiating with the students. And you said there's been like literally zero negotiation attempts made with any of the rent strikers or anything like that. It's almost like they don't want to acknowledge that it's a problem, which is really interesting because, you know, the whole country knows it's a problem now. Like the whole country. It was on BBC, it was on ITV, it was on all the major news channels. You know, this kind of thing. So, you know, you've already said like what you would say, like, you know, if there were anyone from senior management watching the show, but like, you know, what would you say to, like, if you had the chance to like sit down with, you know, like even Nancy, like, you know, I don't know if Nancy's like stepped down at the moment. I think she's the, what do you call it? Like the dean or the CEO of the uni? I don't know, whatever that is.
Vice chancellor, yeah.
Vice chancellor, right? Yeah. What would you say to Nancy or her equivalent or whatever if you had the chance?
I mean, what I'd just try and get across, what I really don't think they actually understand, is that so many of the students, that the reason we're getting involved in this, or the reason this movement has taken place, because there is no other option, and the direction that nationally and locally in Manchester, the direction that both the university system, but especially sort of the accommodation and hall system, the direction it's going in is totally unsustainable, which if there is not a very, very large change quite soon, it's going to be in complete crisis. The amount of students who actually can't afford to stay in their accommodation, they can't afford their rent, it's increasing year on year. So we have people and they say, oh well, I was in your accommodation 4 years ago and it wasn't that bad. Well, we've got people paying £450 more this year than they would have last year, even though it's exactly the same accommodation, although now a year older, probably with some extra mice.
Wow.
So the speed at which the situation is deteriorating is completely unsustainable. The student maintenance loan increased 2.3% this year. Inflation is about 13%, I'm pretty sure, RPI. So already you can see there that it's devaluing at a huge rate against inflation. When you combine that with the fact that the rent itself is going up, something bad is going to happen. If the university, I don't know what the university's goal or plan is. If the rent strike doesn't succeed in its demands, if the university succeeds in sort of using paramilitary style bailiffs to crush the strike or whatever, it's not going to go away. The crisis and the issue will still be there. Students will still not be able to afford their rent. Working class students are already being marginalized and cut out of university because when the average maintenance loan is lower than the average rent at the university, you don't have to be a mathematical genius to see there's something really wrong there. Either your financial situation is struggling or your academic situation is struggling. I know people at the university are working 30-hour week jobs alongside their degree because they can't afford otherwise. This is what the university doesn't realize, is this crisis is not going to go away, and if they don't negotiate, if they don't sort of engage with the rent strike and the demands, the situation will just get worse. It is completely unsustainable. The direction that our university system is heading in is completely awful. There is no longer a higher education system designed to educate. It is entirely profit focused, and it's probably one of the most profit focused sectors in the country. Universities are just money making machines, and I don't expect the senior leadership to be able to. We've seen they're not willing to engage or negotiate on this. But regardless of whether they understand it or not, the crisis is still there, and it's going to be just getting worse and worse. So I think this is part of the reason why we have to fight, is for the next year. and the year after. I mean, I've got a younger brother. I can't imagine what things are going to be like by the time he's wanting to go to university if there isn't massive radical change within the sector this year, next year, because it's going to be completely awful, and so many people are going to be completely shut out of the education system.
I think that point that you made about it being profit focused is so poignant, because there is literally one of the most disturbing things I heard about from a comrade in the union is how University of Salford have had just a massive drive for subs for the last academic year, that there is actually not enough housing in Manchester. Well, I say housing. There is of course enough housing in Manchester. We know this. There are more houses than there are people, right? But the point is that there is not enough affordable, safe housing for students to come and live there. So what's actually been observed by my comrade is that there have been students seen sleeping in the library with all of their stuff, right? And this kind of drive for people to come and study, and not just study, because bear in mind, our international listeners, in the UK, education is not free. You know, you are putting yourself into debt, as Fraser has already been talking about. The maintenance loan is just that. It is a loan. You know, we're talking £60,000 worth of debt. That was what it was when I was at uni. I don't know what it is now. But like, you know, that for the rest of your life hanging over your head. And also the fact that, like, you know, if you want to go to university and, like, you know, study, you want to have like a decent life. You don't want to be homeless. Like these students have been seen at home, like literally they're homeless. They're sleeping in the library, and the staff are being trained on what to do in that scenario. The right thing to do is not tell anyone about it and don't bother them. Maybe erect a small fort around them to help them sleep. You know what I mean? But like it shouldn't even be happening in the first place. Have you seen anything or heard anything similar happening at Uni of?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of stuff like that. I've seen students. We've got the Ali G, Alan Gilbert building, which is sort of like a learning commons, which is open 24/7. It's quite warm, stuff like that. And I mean, I can see that would happen for a lot of students. I mean, especially first year accommodation. Obviously, rent is off, but the substandard accommodation itself, you know, you've got single glazing or you've got windows that are pretty drafty. It's freezing, and often it might be nicer. I've said this to quite a few people. It's sort of like it's almost a joke, but it's also serious, which is that when we were occupying John Owens, my sleeping and living situation was better than when I'm in my university accommodation, because they have hot showers in there, and the heating's been broken for the water in my flat.
That is often something I say to students, that like, I've seen squats that are more habitable than your private rented accommodation.
Oh yeah, genuinely, and it's a massive issue. I mean, especially a lot of students. I mean, some of these flats, sort of, I mean, some of them built sort of 60 years ago. They've got sort of a quite nasty smell almost in them. So you have to have your window open a lot of the time for a lot of students. And it's sort of like, well, then it's freezing, especially during winter. Now, there were students I know that went home really early and came back really late for Christmas holidays because they couldn't bear to spend that much time in their university accommodation. So it's just utterly huge. It's sort of that compounding effect of really, really substandard accommodation with massive issues, which is sort of making students just not want to spend time in there, then combined with sort of massive rent hikes and already extremely high prices. There was actually a statement the university put out where they said, we think the rent price is justifiable, and one of the reasons they gave for justifying it is that we get free Wi-Fi included with the accommodation. Well, it's not free Wi-Fi, is it? Because on top of the rent, we're also paying £9,250 a year in tuition fees.
Right.
We're getting into student debt for. So you can't include that as something we're getting for free, because that's coming out of our tuition fees. So yeah, no, I completely sort of understand what you're saying, and I think it's common. Every single university in the country, I think that will be an issue that students are facing. Because of how universities are so driven for profit, they will not let that money sort of go into improving the accommodation. And students are also worried because if the university does decide to refurbish your accommodation, even if they don't put that much into the money for the refurbishment, you know that there will then be a disproportionate rent hike, and there'll be even less reasonably affordable accommodation. So it's a sort of, students are sort of being crushed between those two issues, which is compounding part of the mental health crisis, which is affecting so many of us. And it's awful. It's really, really awful.
Talk to us about the because this is I feel like you mentioned this earlier, so stop me if you've if you've already answered this, because you've talked about so much stuff already. I think the one of the worst things, one of the biggest things that I've seen is when, you know, they ask people to apply to the hardship fund. Yeah, because the talk to us about the why that's fucking bullshit, Fraser.
I mean, first of all, the amount of sort of means testing that goes on with things like this is already really awful, really, because you can't. The way that means testing works sort of within our university student finance situation is massively flawed, because it often leaves people in really difficult situations. I think one of the biggest ones is to do with estrangement from parents, especially like where it's not sort of in any way legally recognised. Because first of all, parental income does not necessarily mean that they are giving you a proportionate share of that income. So already you have students being massively affected there. But the hardship fund is incredibly, from what I've heard, difficult to access. I think we did a freedom of information request. It was probably around three weeks ago, and I believe 22 out of the 47,000 students at the University of Manchester had received the maximum amount of the hardship fund, which is
yeah, what's the maximum amount?
I believe it's £2,000. Which is, when you bear in mind that the maintenance loan just this year alone has devalued £1,200 against inflation, and that the average, well, the highest, I think, rent increase in a set of private halls is £450. And when you factor in cost of living crisis, it's actually probably less than they would have got next year if the maintenance loan increased with inflation and if the university hadn't chosen to put up rent. But the fact, I mean, 22 out of 47,000 students, I don't think those are the only people who are in hardship. One of the things we looked at, obviously we've done quite a lot of research around like the national picture, and there was an ONS report into sort of the way students have been dealing with things. It's 37% of young people and students this year at university have had to dip into their savings account to either afford rent or food. And it's 14% have actually had to take out a separate loan on top of their tuition fee and student loan to be able to afford to stay at university. So these hardship funds they're almost like a reputation booster to the university. Look, we're doing something, and so many other unis aren't. And I'll admit that, yeah, there are other unis which are doing even less than the University of Manchester. But the £120 million operating surplus, which is immense. I mean, other big universities, I mean, University of Liverpool, I think they only have around a £50 million surplus. Not to say only, but in comparison to Manchester, and they're doing so little. And much of what they have done is because they know that there is sort of a big radical student base within organised. Obviously, we had the rent strike just 2 years ago, which won millions of pounds in its demands. So the little that they have done has only been to sort of try and put students off taking action, but it's had so little impact. I mean, a lot of students got like one-off payment, which was roughly a week's rent, but when they've already put the rent up at the start of the year, I've said to people quite a few times, it's like mugging someone and then giving them back sort of a tenner and say go and get a coffee or something. It's
literally
there's nothing the university's doing to actually genuinely have a meaningful impact on sort of students' well-being. We're waiting currently to find out how much they're going to be putting up the rent next year, but it's going to be coming. There's going to be an increase next year, while the university knows that sort of RPI is at 13%, the costs are rising rapidly, and whatever that is, we're going to stand out and we're going to oppose. I mean, one of our rent strike demands is obviously like rebates and reductions for this year, but also like once we have a lower rate of rent, freeze it at that, because we don't want next year, we don't want the year after, we don't want them struggling even more than people are this year. So it's just terrible what the union's doing. It's really dehumanizing, I think, to a lot of students. And it's made to be these processes for applying for hardship funds and applying for help in the university is made to be so difficult and so sort of alienating. Like the level of means testing you have to go into that, a lot of students will simply be put off by the amount, and yeah, it's terrible. It'd be interesting to see what the current numbers are. Obviously, a freedom of information request can take up to a month, but it'd be interesting to see what the actual numbers are, because I highly doubt that any more than 50 students have in total received sort of the maximum amount of help from the hardship fund, which is disgraceful. Not just £120 million operating surplus, but the unrestricted reserves that this university has, so not including their restricted reserves, which are sort of meant for like almost their rainy day fund, is £1.5 billion.
That is absurd.
Oh yeah.
If I I don't know how much they've mobilized in total for cost of living. I think combined cost of living and COVID help over the last sort of 2 years has been under £15 million from their unrestricted reserves that they've mobilized for helping tens of thousands of students over that period. And out of £1.5 billion, that is a drop. That's absolutely tiny. What is that money there for if it's not for helping students in the period of the highest inflation in 40 years? What is that money for if it's not for helping students when they can't afford to pay their rent, when they're having to rely on food banks, when they're having to work 30 hours alongside their degree? It shows that the profit is sacred to the university senior management, and they will not let anything get in the way of profit, including the well-being of the students at the university.
Yeah, it's just obviously such a kick in the teeth, you know, when you're already struggling so much that you would have to, you know, degrade yourself. Someone, Shafiq Mogg in the Twitch chat has just said it sounds like the hardship fund is being run by the DWP, and yeah, it's similar, right? You know, it's that kind of like degrading, humiliating experience where, like, you know, you have to like basically beg for money from the state, from the institution that you're at, and then literally like getting, you know, just rejected on the absurd you know, grounds of means testing. For anyone that doesn't know, the DWP is the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK, which handles benefits, disability benefits and stuff like that. But yeah, it's some people have said that it's like psychological torture, you know, to try and go through something like that, and I imagine it's very similar for students doing that too.
Yeah, we have a similar thing down here with our work and income New Zealand. You know, we apply for benefits and stuff, and you can get hardship grants and stuff the same. But it's like, I know so many people who have just chosen just to completely just drop it and receive no financial aid at all because the system is so like demoralizing, and like the staff there can be quite just really just mean, you know. And yeah, a lot of people have said that the worst part about it was actually, you know, like going in and applying for these things, because the hoops that make you jump through and just like constantly pushing you on like, why did you need this, and why hadn't you been doing these other things, why weren't you working more or sleeping less, or, you know, just ridiculous junk like that. And it's you know, it's obviously it's a deterrent so you don't come back, so that they, you know, they can they're not, you know, they're not spending all their budget or whatever like that. And it's just like, it's not you know, it's not a system that's made to help people. It's a system that's made to hit KPIs and things like that, you know. And it's yeah, it's, I mean, I'm guessing it's the exact same thing, right? Like, it's not yeah, it's made with the bottom line for the university in mind, as opposed to like, you know, the well-being of the students or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. You were mentioning that your little brother. What does your little brother think of what you're doing?
Oh, he quite likes it. You know, when I go back home from university, he's always sort of asking like, "How's it go? Have you won yet? Have you?"
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
no,
He probably thinks you're a badass.
yeah, I think that, especially after now I've been dragged out by the bailiffs. I think so. But I think, yeah,
Awesome.
it's really important. I think you've seen sort of how deep this goes within the like our British education system. Is sort of like to what extent students are from quite a young age really pushed to go to university, and constantly as that's going on, universities are raking in more and more profit. And it's awful. I can't imagine what the education system from primary school right through to university is going to look like in sort of 5-10 years time.
Yeah, we've had that down here as well. The, you know, universities that the role as an education provider is not even like a secondary thing, you know. It's like they run like a business. They've got like property portfolios, they're, you know, like investing in all these different things, and it's just like, it's wild. Like, I've heard of university people protesting at universities so that the universities will like withdraw their you know, like their I guess like financial interests and things like, you know, everything from like you know, like weapons manufacture and like war profiteering and stuff to just like, you know,
Those,
other kind of corrupt industries.
there's all those sorts of issues at Manchester as well. Sort of alongside sort of the issues we've raised with like cost of living and rent. We know the university has contracts with BP. We know the university has contracts with sort of weapons manufacturers, and they're doing that sort of research. We have our sort of student union has like assemblies and stuff where people sort of discuss things. We had one quite recently, which is it was the question like, should the university be contributing to like the research and development of like unmanned like military drones? It's like what a question to put to your
Yeah, yeah.
about stuff like that. It's like no, actually, but it's how sort of entwined sort of the higher education system is with sort of the military industrial
Yeah, absolutely.
complex, and sort of especially like climate and sort of the oil aspect. That was often when the uni brings in recruiters, sort of as a way the system is set up, people that are sort of geography students, geology students, stuff like that. So many of them will be pushed into working for big fossil fuel companies. Students that are sort of working in sort of chemical engineering, stuff like that, sort of aerospace, they will be pushed into working for military companies. Like they have these massive recruiters, stuff like Lockheed Martin, stuff like BAE Systems, that will go into universities, and they take advantage of sort of graduate students that have very limited financial sort of possibilities after university, offering massive debt, and they take advantage of that. And it's awful. And it goes right down to sort of the very heart of our higher education system. These issues and sort of the way that profit has sort of completely sort of corrupted higher education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've seen other things as well, like some of the highest positions being like people that are like basically like the kind of financial advisors for the universities and things like that, like managing their investment portfolios. And it's kind of like at that point, you really got to kind of take a step back, right? Like, you know, think about like what is the function of what we're doing here. But you know, but obviously it's like this is a place, you know, this is a place that they occupy in like the greater economic system, right?
Mule, I don't know. We're about to jump into questions, but I don't know if you had any extra things you wanted to talk about in the little sliver of time we have left, or if we just jump right in.
I've said way too many things. Let's have.
You have not said too many things, Mule. Don't you dare.
Let's have my co-hosts read some based questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Based guests.
I'll read the first one from
Yeah.
Base Junkie. Base Junkie asks, what are ways people can aid and support rent strikers if an action is called in or near their community?
I think so. One of the things that we've sort of been doing is we've had, and they can often be quite inaccessible. I think it's something that rent strike groups themselves have to make sure they are publicising well. Is when there is sort of a high risk of sort of bailiffs or eviction teams, there should be some sort of alert system. It's something we had set up for the Simon building occupation. Once the union had gone through court, we knew there was going to be a high chance of bailiffs coming. So we just had sort of one of those alert WhatsApp groups, sort of where only admins can post in it. Probably had about 200 people in this because we knew that we would need people to be able to come down and film. That we needed people to get the evidence that we were being dragged out. We were completely right. Obviously, the university sent these bailiffs in at 5 a.m. when there was going to be no public about, when there was going to be no one in the university buildings to try and get as little coverage as possible. Obviously, that's been really bad for them. But that's something really important is where possible, if you know that there's rent strike, if you know there's occupations ongoing, try and get us involved, even if you're not actually taking part. Whether if you're organising it as well, make sure there's sort of solidarity group chats, make sure there's group chats for members of the public and people like locally to join. So if there is a sudden urgent thing like an eviction going on and they just need numbers, whether it's for a demonstration, whether it's sort of people to film and record police or bailiffs, that's really important. Again, financially supporting any sort of rent strike movement, stuff like that is always important, especially if it looks like they're going to be going into legal costs. And even if sort of those aren't things that people are able to do, solidarity, you know, keep them rise, one of the most important things. So as students, sort of just people getting in touch saying like, we're amazed by what you're doing, that has a huge impact on people. So it makes people more confident they're actually doing the right thing. So yeah, those are some of the things I'd say. But the alert system is really important as well. And for people organising occupational rent strike where there's a risk of bailiffs, make sure you have something like that. Make sure you have a way of getting people like urgently to know. Even a lot of people aren't up at 5 a.m. We probably managed to get 20 people down at 5 a.m. within sort of 10 minutes to the building that was occupied. And that made the difference between getting on BBC News and hardly having anyone know about. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's
Yeah,
a great
that's
answer.
awesome. So the next one we've got is from Anarchist Artificer saying, I'm disabled and wanted to know how I can help support protests and other activist actions, given that I can't participate in a lot of direct action stuff. The Know Your Rights training was exciting because it showed how much someone like me can actually do. Oh, that's awesome. I'm assuming that this means that they actually participated in one of those workshops, which is cool. But yeah, so is there anything that yeah, like, is there anything you can think of that you guys have done, or even perhaps roles that, you know, like weren't filled, but, you know, you could imagine would be, you know, that someone that kind of, I guess, like is physically disabled or unable to go out for long periods of time, would be able to help you out with?
Oh yeah, I think there's sort of a huge amount of stuff, and this is something that we've sort of been working as hard as we can really to sort of make sure that spaces that we're operating have been as accessible as possible. Because I think it is often an issue that you have a lot of sort of groups and organisations where they organise, and there are sort of barriers in place to people who might not be able to get involved in the same way as some people. So obviously,
It's
with
not the right kind of barricade that we want here, right?
not the good type of barricade. But it's yeah, and ways of mitigating this, especially sort of as organisers, you have to make sure spaces are as accessible as possible. So when we've held occupations, we've made sure we've had sort of had a proper think about like, well, how easily can people get in and out when they need to? What support can we give? In terms of organising, we've made sure sort of there are ways for everyone to get involved, regardless of like what their capabilities are, like what their time commitments are, everything like that. So whether it's like helping out on social media, whether it's giving advice, so we've had sort of discussions and dialogue with the Disabled Student Society at Manchester about sort of like we've asked them sort of if there's issues with stuff we're doing with like accessibility, like just reach out to us, let us know straight away so we can get it sorted out. That sort of dialogue, whether it's like people like helping out with social media posts, stuff like that. So I think it's a massive responsibility for activists to always make sure that there's stuff is as accessible as possible and that everyone can get involved regardless of what their capabilities are. So I think yeah, that's something that's really important. It's something that I think is absolutely crucial to organising as well. So yeah, and it's letting people know as well as when there are issues, when there are things that you think organisers can be doing to make spaces more accessible. It's just being able to where possible to like speak up, whether it's sort of messaging people and saying like, I think you should be doing this, or I think you would be making it more inclusive if you did this. I think that's the most important thing, is because we should all sort of be striving to make sure sort of left-wing and radical spaces are as inclusive and as accessible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Next question. Anarchic Alex says, have you been linking up with students in other unis in the UK to coordinate a national campaign? I see a lot of potential for coordinated UK-wide rent strikes, given most uni occupation or accommodation is contracted out to a small number of private companies.
Oh yeah, there has been a pretty good amount of dialogue. There's some sort of general discussions in the works, some of which is like ongoing stuff like that. But first of all, if anyone watching, student at university in the UK, reach out, go on the Instagram or the Twitter of the rent strike and reach out, and we will work with you. We'll be able to provide that support. We've already had sort of like phone calls and discussions with students at quite a lot of universities about the specifics of occupations, the specifics of organising a rent strike, and that sort of included like providing them with like sort of like some of the resources we've used and advice, and it's been brilliant. And it's also linking it with even broader student movements, sort of anti-fossil fuels and divestment and demilitarization campaigns. On the 1st of March, we held a demonstration in Manchester, and we had students from like 10 different universities like send up like little solidarity delegations and like spend the night in the occupation. So that was sort of like people in total, like we've had people from like Nottingham, we've had people from Liverpool, Lancaster, Glasgow, all over the country, and it's what we need to do really. It's obviously organize. The first step of organising the grassroots is in your local area, but it's as much as possible you need to get it out. You need to get sort of a broader national campaign. So yeah, it's a conversation that I think we need to be having, and we're doing it as much as possible, as speaking to students at the universities. But don't hesitate to reach out, and don't hesitate to sort of speak to other people in your organising circles about organising a rent strike if you're a university student that's watching.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, so we've got Shafiq Mok asking, we know that substandard accommodation can affect people's health. What kind of health effects have students reported, and has this affected their studies?
I think so massively, but I think both physical and mental health, and the link between the two. is huge. I think sort of being in often like small cramped rooms can have sort of really serious effects on sort of people's mental like health and sort of ability to deal with issues, especially when that's compounded by sort of cost of living crisis. You know, a lot of people can't necessarily afford to go out when they want to, despite getting into massive debt. But physical health wise, sort of issues for sort of silverfish and rodents in accommodation is already posing a huge health risk to students. Mold is probably one of the biggest ones. I mean, there's been reports. We've heard very little about it from the university. We've had students reach out and say they've actually been hospitalised because of issues with mold. And this is something we've heard at a lot of universities across the country, because universities do very, very little about stuff like this. There's the amount of sort of health and potential health and safety hazards from the lack of money which is actually being used to sort of keep accommodation up to standard. I could speak for probably another hour about sort of the potential risk, but I think mold is probably one of the biggest sort of immediate impacts that have been affecting students sort of physically, as we've heard lots of reports of people getting ill. And when I moved into my uni accommodation, I had a really like persistent sort of like wet cough for about 2 months. I probably a lot of that was just being in very substandard accommodation. But yeah, there's so many issues with this, and it's because the universities, they will not invest a single penny that they could otherwise get away with not spending. They want to get as much money out with putting as little in as possible. And and the mental health effects has been immense on students. I think a lot of people are under huge amount of pressure.
And also just stuff like like if you've got like moldy cupboards or silverfish and stuff like that, you can't keep food for long times and long periods and stuff, so it's kind of like eating into that as well. It's there's so many ways that little things like this, like just having an uninsulated house or whatever, just eats into like every element of your life. It's
and
rough.
I think an important thing to remember, this is local to Manchester as well, is that the toddler Awaba shark was killed by black mold. Like that is on the autopsy. Like, so just because he was a toddler doesn't mean that other people aren't going to get affected by this very real health hazard. Like it's a legitimate health concern. It's in the housing health and safety what is it called? The Housing Health and Safety Rating System, which was legislation introduced in the UK in about 2005. That damp needs to be dealt with in a property, otherwise it can cause extreme negative health issues. And I think, like you said, Fraser, you had your cough there, and I've heard so many people say similar things. And it's like, I know what it's like living in a damp property. I've lived in one, like I've lived in Manchester my whole life, and I know that when you're renting a property and you're sort of like, this isn't like too good a gaff to be living in, do you know what I mean? And there's like a smell to it, it just doesn't feel right. Like, you might touch the wall and be like, that just feels damp, you know what I mean? Like you can feel it, and like, you see the mold everywhere in the corner of the room and shit. You're always fucking sick. It's like a real health issue that people really have to deal with, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think I saw Geopolitics, they did an interview with one of the rent strikers in halls, and she was specifically talking about like this is basically made everybody in this house sick. We can't afford to open the windows, it's too fucking cold. We can't afford to put our heating on. It's all the issues that you've already spoken about, Fraser. So this is a housing issue that is absolutely going to be affecting the students, but I think it transcends, especially in Manchester. I think what a lot of people forget about housing in this part of the world, in this part of the country, is that this city was built on a swamp, and like a lot of these sort of buildings are they're getting on now. Like Fraser said, like there's like a 60-year-old building that the university has. There's like just these ancient buildings where they weren't built with stuff like this in mind. The older sort of housing was designed so that people could like open their doors and have their fucking heating on full blast, because heating didn't cost that much back in the day. Like you could literally do that. You could have all the radiators on, all the fucking windows open, and that would be fine. But nowadays it's just not the case. You can't do that. You know what I mean? You've got to literally like choose, I don't know, between whether you put your heating on or whether you eat that week. So yeah, it's that's something that we have to consider. But anyway, since I am still talking, I will ask the final question, which is from Wobbegong, who says,
it's a bit of a two-parter, by the way.
Yeah,
That's
it's a bit of a two-part here. We've got Anna Kick Alex weighing in again at the end as well. So the first part of it is a boring question, but I'd be interested to know about the rent strike's decision-making processes and internal structures. You've responded to events and developments proper, quickly, and effectively. So it'd be good to know how tactics get put together internally. And then adding on to that, Anna Kick Alex says, building on this, have you had any internal disputes over policy or strategy, and how have you dealt with these as they arose?
So we've had a very open, and it's been really actually interesting to be a part of. Is sort of the way that people who are all essentially the same age, but some with like massive differences of experience have been able to work together on this. So it's quite anyone is able to get involved in the organising, the activism. There isn't sort of a formal structure, like there is no sort of decision-making committee, stuff like that. But at the same time, the level of democracy and the level of participation and sort of like listening to everyone involved has been massive. So from the very beginning, sort of the big thing that was agreed on and decided sort of collectively by rent strikes is any sort of demand or negotiation from the university is entirely a collective rent strike decision. We're all taking the same risk with this. So any sort of decision of that scale that is actually affecting sort of the specifics of the rent strike will be a complete open vote, which will be held. In terms of sort of more sort of rapid, like fast decision making, sort of when you're having to respond to stuff, often that can be, I mean, we've had stuff late at night. I mean, stuff like the 5 a.m. getting dragged out, stuff like the occupations. There is, I mean, a lot of stuff's all been organised over WhatsApp. I mean, it's been very interesting sort of how a grassroots student movement has organised itself. And sort of there's it's almost the more you put in, sort of the more likely you are to be there when a decision needs to be made. But we've been able to call sort of like mass assemblies, like open meetings of rent strikers whenever there's something important. Sort of democracy and sort of participation is the most important thing with all this. And it's actually been amazing actually how sort of leading on to the second part of that is how little sort of like there's been no sort of serious policy or decision-making disagreements over that. Like there've been all sorts of like, I don't like the color of that graphic, or I don't think
yeah.
But, because there's no sort of formal structure to it at the same time, and it's been very much a sort of anyone is more than welcome to get involved. Like, everyone has different skills. They don't let me anywhere near the TikTok. I would be terrible if I was the one making the TikToks and stuff like that. So I think the most that's it really is sort of when decisions need to be made really quickly, it's often just down to who's there at the time or who's relevant to it. But there are no barriers to sort of people getting organised. So we've had people who've been involved from the start and have obviously had things on. They've got busy and they sort of drifted off in the organising. There's been sort of first years who've not done political stuff before and they've got more involved as time's got on. But it's a very, very sort of collective decision-making process, and I think that's part of the reason why there has been so little sort of internal disagreement. Really, is because decisions are. If there's a decision where there's sort of massive, if there was going to be a decision sort of where there was like massive like disagreements, it was like 50-50, chances are there'd have to be like a big public open meeting. We'll probably go and do it in a lecture theatre or something like that. So it's been really interesting sort of seeing how something that almost started as like a very decentralized grassroots movement has sort of been able to sort of overcome particular challenges. Like when we've had an issue, we've had sort of change of strategy, like when we started doing like an open assembly or sort of a public meeting in a student hall, we've been able to do that. It's been sort of very flexible, and I think it's part of the power, sort of the power that we have is that when we need to make a very quick decision at a time when half the people are asleep or in bed hungover, we've been able to do that. But when we've needed to sort of consult with the vast majority of rent strikers and make a collective decision, we're also able to do that, and it's very effective, I think, in terms of the structure.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome because like I think a lot of people do worry maybe too much about this kind of stuff. Like I do understand where the worries come from. But generally speaking, it goes with what we know about revolutionary optimism, right? Which is that the material conditions that keep getting worse under capitalism will basically mean that everybody has to just do a revolution. And I think when you're in those material conditions, you just know what you need to change. And, you know, if people are sort of, you know, I don't know, being a bit time wastery, they're being a bit sort of nitpicky and stuff like that. Like, you could see that straight away, do you know what I mean? And sort of go, hang on a minute, listen, there's a bigger picture here. We need to deal with this. Not that anyone obviously has been in University of Manchester, you know, rent strike and stuff, but I think that, like, that's what people might be worried about. You know, when you have an organization that is like single issue, you can quite often, you know, see that, like, you know, everybody is organizing under the same banner. Everybody knows what this is about, even if they might have like slight differences in opinion and stuff like that. Then it's you know, as long as they're not hateful, obviously, you know, causing actual damage.
I think that's been really important with it, is sort of that there's been, like, even though there have been sort of like big differences in experiences, there haven't been like interpersonal issues and stuff that has been like minimized as much as possible, because we've not been sort of running a sort of, oh, you're more experienced and organized, so you get to make the decisions, stuff like that. Because I mean, it is difficult with any sort of organizing, especially when you've got like several hundred people involved at sort of in massively different sort of social backgrounds, massively different political situations, and broadly different political views. It's impressive how well we've actually been able to do it, but I think a lot of that is because there hasn't been sort of a space for sort of power struggles or anything like that. You know, it's very open, organized, and like people that have sort of skills and things that they're willing to do, and people put in as much time and as they're willing to do. If people want to take risks like occupations, they're more than open to. But because it's very open, because we've been able to keep the organized very grassroots, it's been able to sort of like minimize sort of any sort of sectarian political disagreements, or even sort of interpersonal stuff between people who might not necessarily be involved in political things before. But I think there will always be criticisms of, regardless of the campaign or the organization, there will always be a space to criticize and say, well, you could have done this, or you could have done this, or I don't necessarily like this bit of the structure. I think that's always going to be a bit of an issue with organizing, but I think it's just keeping everything as open as possible where possible, being able to be flexible, being able to change, especially as some of the most important things you can have with a campaign like this, especially when sort of the people you're up against, like the University of Manchester, is a massive financial institution, are also rapidly changing their tactics. So I think while there's been certain things we could have done better, probably, I think we've given it a really good go in terms of the structure and the way you've been able to respond and the way you've been able to sort of engage in a decision-making process collectively.
That is just absolutely awesome. I think, yeah, I think all the hosts are extremely impressed with the organizing that you've been doing.
True work.
And yeah, really, really inspiring. And genuinely, we're going to be keeping an eye on what you are up to in the coming weeks and months. Very exciting. Yeah, and one thing that we like to do here at Red Planet at the end of a show is basically give our dorks of chat, our little nerds, our little geeks, our losers in the chat some homework, because they love it. They love doing homework.
And our listeners.
Our listeners as well. Anyone who's listening on the podcast, that's right. And yeah, so do you have any homework that you would want to give anyone listening or watching the show?
Yeah, so I think a good bit of it would be, if you're private renting, if you're a university student, if you're sort of renting from university, if you're sort of just in a direct landlord situation, first things first, sort of just where possible, sort of have a look at their finances, see what is public about them. Often I think one of the most radical things people can do is, just boring as it can be, looking at data, looking at like what's actually going on. I mean, some of the most radical theories and ideas that we've had in the sort of the history of like progressive movements has simply start from people just looking down, saying, well, let's look at the data, let's look at what's actually going on. Have a look into your landlord, you know, maybe speak to other people who might share the same landlord, Google them, look at the news, stuff like that, see what's going on. Are other people that might have the same landlord having issues with mold? Is there an issue that you're having? Like, could you be sort of joining with other people with a similar landlord and maybe even having your own rent strike? Could you be joining a tenants union if you're in sort of private rental with other people in a neighborhood who are having similar issues? So I think, yeah, joining tenants union, massive one, if that's something you're able to do, because it puts you in a much stronger position, because you can take sort of collective action when it's needed. Being aware of community organising groups, things like Acorn in the UK, things like GMTU, who might be able to get involved with eviction resistance should people need that. and just looking at what is going on, looking at who your landlord really is, looking at how many properties do they own, looking at what other issues do people that have the same landlord as you face, because this is often where collective action starts. It's looking at what the problem is, it's looking at who's facing the problem, and it's looking at who's causing it as well. And then it's saying, well, this is how we start, and this is how the rent strike started, and then obviously it's gone on from there. So there was a bit of homework, I'd say. It's research situation of who owns where you're renting from. And get involved with other people, get involved with community organizations and tenants unions, because that's where change really starts, is when collectively people sort of decide to stand up to an injustice.
Hell yeah. Awesome stuff. And yeah, just another thing as well, like people in the Twitch chat saying join Living Rent if you're in Scotland, join London Renters Union if you're down in London. There are also loads of tenants unions in the US. That link that you had last time, Tim, the map of
what was it, the dual power map that Black Socialists of America put together? Yeah,
that's right.
Good.
Yeah, Black Socialists of America, dual power map. If you're in the US and you want to find a tenants union, just fucking go there. Honestly, like I was so impressed.
It's such a good map.
Yeah, the tenants unions in the US. Fraser, it's been an absolutely amazing show. You've been an amazing guest. Extremely based. Thanks for coming on. And solidarity and all the best. Is there anything that you want to plug before you go? Have you got any links that you want us to share in the chat and stuff?
Yeah, I'd say go and follow Rent Strike on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. It'll be either Rent Strike UOM or UOM Rent Strike. You can keep up with all of our amusing shenanigans and also serious issues like being dragged out. But we also try and put a lot of sort of useful information on there about sort of rent strikes, about sort of how people can get involved with stuff there. Just go out and make a difference. It's been fantastic being on tonight, and thank you so much for having me as well.
You are
awesome. Thanks for
very
coming
welcome.
On.
Thank you so much for
coming. You rule.
Bye. Absolutely incredible. Really enjoyed that.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I think just like really sort of
feel pumped.
Encompasses. Yeah. If you feel pumped.
Amped.
Yeah, you should, because I think that really sort of encompasses everything that we spoke about on Red Planet before. Like, when he was talking about like people just sort of coming together under like crushing material conditions, and then like also like the fact that there was other stuff that he said and I've forgotten what it is, but you'll know what I mean. You know what I'm on about, right?
My favorite part is just like the image of them like sneaking in and just not leaving. Or like they just went in, and then like can you imagine them like hiding in the cupboard or whatever?
It's kind of like Home Alone stuff too.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
It has this like funny it's like
camping out at work.
It's awesome that they're like having. It sounds like they're making light of the whole situation, which is really really cool. No need to be like extra depressed about everything when you can try to actually make some fun out of it.
You actually hit the nail on the head, because they did say that they were gonna plant Home Alone style traps in John Owens. They didn't do this. It was a joke.
I love the paper planes as well, sitting on the roof, throwing them down on the security.
So good, honestly. Good.
Yeah, great vibes.
So that is us for another week, listeners, audience, chatters. But before we do go, I think it is always pertinent to mention the Red Planet Patreon. If you enjoyed today's show, know that it is pretty much only really possible for us to be as based as we are right now with our wonderful producer Conrad. Help us feed him. He's such a hungry boy. And also help us feed potentially another mouth with Red Planet, as we are looking to hire an editor. So the goal function is unfortunately going to be gone on Patreon for some reason. That's an email I had recently, so this is going to be gone, but we are still looking to hit this goal, which is $1,100 a month, or 1,000 UK pounds, or I think it's 1,300 New Zealand dollars. Tim, I'm not sure.
No, $1,773.77 in New Zealand dollars.
There you go.
That's our next goal.
Yeah, we're looking to hire an editor so we can do all sorts. Like, chat, imagine if alongside this episode, I was able to go down to the rent strikers while they were doing an occupation and film all the stuff, all the people, and do interviews and have it all. Imagine that. Imagine if Tim could have gone down and been filmed with Posey Parker doing whatever he was doing this weekend. Imagine if Kira manages to get out on, like, I don't know, some kind of like cool animal rebellion style thing, and, like, you know, gets to interview some activists and shit like that. How awesome would that be alongside what we're doing here? Well, we can unlock all that if you get us to the next goal. We are basically looking to get to that goal, and you can become a patron. There's loads of different cool rewards that you get from being a patron, one of which is in Sprite mode. And if you want to get started with your support for Red Planet, you can pay $2 a month. It's $2 US and £2 UK pounds, and $2.50 or $3, Tim.
So $4 New Zealand for Sprite month. Yeah.
There you go. So you can get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite, and benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you're helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, and access to the Red Planet Discord. Imagine that. But what's the next mode, Tim?
So the next one is Goblin mode, which is American $10 a month, New Zealand $19 a month, and about £9.50.
You got it.
Yeah, cool. Great British pounds sterling or whatever.
Colonial pounds.
Yeah. Everyone loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from the Sprite mode. A pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only in places like that, and then access to exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts. So the hangouts, once again, like Sprite mode will get you into the Discord, but hangouts a thing for just like the next, all the tiers up, where we just have like a documentary or a movie screening, and we hang out, we talk about it, and we, and it's something kind of lefty, or like, something you might not have heard or seen, or something like that. Something a little bit more interesting. Definitely cool to hang out and talk about. But what's the next one up, Kira? What's beast mode?
Holy shit! It's beast mode. $20 a month, or
I'm struggling. Oh no, it's
38 New Zealand.
30 New Zealand, or
thanks, Tim.
Why is always one of you struggling with this?
Why don't I have the Patreon?
It's probably like 18, 19 pounds, right?
I spelled Patreon wrong. I wrote Patron.
You closed down the window already?
I can just link. I don't have it. Oh, hold up. It's nearly here. It's £19. Thank you, now on Starfire. Thank you. There you go. It's £19. That's what it is.
Well, if you're just beast mode. Beast mode. $20 a month, or all the other things you just heard. Holy shit. Are you actually going to go beast mode? Well, then we can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yes, pin badges. Wear your excellent new Red Planet pin badge literally everywhere. It's completely cool and good to do. But if you wanted to go even harder, if you wanted to even go even more base, say you're a sicko, what could you do?
Oh, if you want to do it, Tim, you can do it.
All right, yeah. Well, you could go sicko mode, which is 189 New Zealand dollars a month, 100 American, and I'm guessing 90, 98, 90 something
94
pounds.
It's
94 pounds. Cool. And if you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all of the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of the stream. So, which would look like this. Thank you to our sickos, Goblin Games NZ and JBP, for their sicko mode patronage, and keeping the lights on at Red Planet HQ.
Thank you so much. It means the world.
Yeah. It really does. So yeah, that's the Patreon. That's what we're doing. How about before we wrap these things up, my good friend Kira, why don't you tell the nice folks at home where they can find you?
Okay, folks at home, you're going to want to go to my link tree. My link tree is Kira Chats. You find all my links there, including my not safe for work links that I cannot specify any further because of Twitch's terms of service. Check it out. You can also follow me on Twitter. I mean, all this is on my link tree at Kira Chats, but twitter.com/Kira Chats, twitch.com/Kira Chat, or twitch.tv, excuse me, /Kira Chats. Oh my God. And join my Discord. I'm always there. We're always hanging out. We're always having movie nights and stuff like that. Discord.gg/Kira Chats. And I wanted to make an announcement. This Thursday, the 30th, one of my friends, she's a Black queer creator and artist, Soul Bunny. She's actually dealing with an eviction right now because of her university. So we are going to be raising money for her on my channel the 30th.
Shit.
So so this is really, I think it's a nice, very smooth segue from what we just talked about. If anything we talked about
extra
affected
homework,
you, right? Or extra homework. Make sure you, at the very least, tune into my stream this Thursday, twitch.tv/Kira Chats. I know a lot of us, most of us, all of us are strapped for cash, understandable. But if you can't donate, honestly, tuning in and just giving us a view, maybe telling your other people, like in your Discord server, wherever you are, just being cool. It helps. It shows like a lot of solidarity, and it also it just helps to increase engagement for the show and just get more people to tune in. So be there the 30th on my channel. Got it?
Or be square.
Or be square. If you're speaking of squares, who's not a square? Well, my friend Mule. Where can I find my friend Mule who's not a square?
You're right. I am not a square. I'm actually really cool. And I'm getting more and more cool with how many times I'm saying that I'm a cool guy. So you can find me on link.ee DJ Mule, DJMUEL. Yeah, all my links are there. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube. I got my own Patreon, and I am doing a cool video. I've been deep in the editing hole this week, and I'm going to be even deeper in that editing hole this coming week as well, just trying to desperately finish my video that I've been working on for fucking 6 months apparently. So yeah, that is something that's going on, so please consider supporting me if you are on Patreon. If that's not your bag, you can go to my Twitch streams where I basically like talk politics, react to lefty videos, and also like gardening shit. I normally do gardening videos now. I like watching a lot of permaculture stuff. It's just really cool, like growing your own food and eating it. I can't do that because I don't have a garden, but like one day I might. So maybe I'll do that. That's the end of it. Tim, what about you?
Well, you can find me here on Twitch or over on YouTube at Conquest of Dread. Or you can jump all the way over to the wastelands of Twitter and find me as Dread Conquest there, which is where I'm probably most active these days. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty easy to find me. However, our missing Power Ranger that isn't here, Sophie from Mars.
Wonderful Sophie. Where is she?
Yeah. She can be found under Sophie from Mars pretty much everywhere. If you search Sophie from Mars, there's no other Sophies from Mars. She's the only one. The sole Sophie from Mars. So that's patreon.com Sophie from Mars, where you can help support her to create awesome videos and stuff. Or you can go, or Linktree, Sophie from Mars, everything's there. Or Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, Sophie from Mars. But the Patreon is the important one. Support those videos and support our good girl Soph. Yeah, that's all of us. That is all of the Power Rangers.
That's the show. That's the show.
We did it.
That's the show. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Yeah. Make sure you check out any local tenant unions in your area, and remember to come hang out with Kira on the 30th, a couple days from now. And
That's
point
right.
at your webcam right now to it.
Point at the webcam.
Last
Point
homework,
right there.
extra homework.
We're all touching
And we'll
fingers
see you
now.
next week.
See you next week. Bye. Tim's done with this.